Hey guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It's 9 o'clock and it is time for a Talk Magic. And I'm here with one of my favorite performers, one of my favorite magicians, a guy who has been at the top of the UK magic and mentalism scene for so many years. It is the one and only X himself, Marc Spelmann. Marc, thank you so much for coming on the channel. Really
That's a
appreciate it.
pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I'm really flattered that you asked me, Craig. I've known your work, and you're not shy. We all know who Craig Petty is. We've seen you around. So yeah, no, it's lovely to be able to sort of chat magic with you.
It's great. I'm trying to be good these days, Marc. I'm trying to be really good. So.
No, I know you are, but retain that honesty.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think everyone loves about you, is that it's kind of, it is what it is. Lay it on the line. So
You know what? I remember before we start this interview, do you remember many years ago on the Wizard Product Review, we brought out, me and Dave Penn parodied your Biokinesis.
Yeah, okay. So no, that wasn't, just for the record. That Biokinesis is it's not mine. It was actually Berk Eretay, who is a Turkish mentalist.
You were on
And
the trailer though. You kind of you were
yeah,
the
yeah. Well, Berk bought it out through myself and Peter Nardi, and me and Peter at the time had like, Peter's obviously Alakazam Magic, but we had a little joint venture together called Inner Mind Productions. So we bought that out through Inner Mind Productions as a sort of like a 50-50 collaboration, but we sort of funded it, but Berk is the creator. But yes, I do remember it. It was with the goggly eyes, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was.
I remember, Craig.
It was all Dave's idea, even though he got me to do it. It was all Dave's idea.
Don't worry, it's all right. I know Dave really well as well. He's a cool guy.
Now, obviously, Marc, you've been at the top of your game for a very long time. You've been creating, performing, releasing magic, commercial magic and mentalism that everybody all over the world does. But in the last couple of years, the last 2 or 3 years, you've really kind of exploded worldwide with everything that's happened on Britain's Got Talent. And that's something that I want to talk to you about. But just for the people that have been living under a rock for the last decade or so and don't know who you are, let's start from the very beginning. When did you get into magic, Marc? Was it the typical origin story that you had a magic set bought you when you were a kid, or?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, public. It's funny because on my sort of website, it is a bit of a mismatch actually. Because on my website originally, you know what it's like when you do your marketing. Originally, my website said Marc Spelmann when I was heavily mentalist. Like I was just getting into this being really serious mentalist. And my biography or about page that no one ever reads on your website, so don't worry about it too much. You could write a load of old nonsense on there, no one's ever going to read it. But originally it said something about Uri Geller and bending spoons. Now there's an element of truth in that story, but truth be told, my dearly departed nan, who passed away many years ago, bought me a Paul Daniels magic set, and I absolutely fell in love with magic. But I think a lot of people get magic sets, and they open it up, learn a couple of the tricks, and then it gets pushed underneath the bed, and they forget about it, and they get on with the rest of their lives. And there's a very few sort of like oddballs like myself and you, and others watching this, who kind of go, "Oh, that's good. I might just spend a lot of time practicing this stuff." And that was it. I just completely got into magic. I love this notion. I was really shy when I was a kid. Really shy. Awkwardly shy, actually, when I was a kid. So to be able to do something that would make the adults go, hang on a minute. And I remember just learning. I don't want to obviously talk about methods too much because obviously anybody can watch this. But the card case that came with the early Paul Daniels magic sets, I think, was one of the best. Even though it was black plastic card case, it was so deceptive, the early ones. And a friend of, I don't know if you're friends, there's a magician called Mick Wilson on Facebook, and he's a collector of Paul Daniels, and he heard me say this, and he very kindly sent me a collector's edition, like, of this from when I was like 7 or 8 years old, this little card case. So I just fell in love with it. I absolutely loved magic. I love this notion of sort of just being able to do something that other people couldn't. And yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I also had a really natural ability when I was a kid as well. I could watch magic shows and I just understood magic in a really odd way where I remember watching, I mean, I was 14 when David Copperfield vanished the Statue of Liberty, but I understood how he did it. And I don't say that with any ego. There's no ego here at all. But I just kind of thought, you know what, that could clearly it doesn't really vanish, right? There's an illusion going on, and I don't believe it's a camera trick. I don't think the camera tricks in the mid 80s weren't that good. So, but I just could work things out. I just understood them, and because of that, I just fell in love with this theatre, this world of make believe, if you like, and I loved sort of that moment of magic and just and not being fooled. I don't like that word fooled
Mm.
because I think fooled is like I think fooled is when someone scams you and you've been fooled into something. And I've never really liked that word with magic. I always think to myself, as a magician, we theatrically evoke a sense of wonder and astonishment. Okay. And in real life, there's lots of wonder and astonishment. You're a father yourself, so you'll know that your kids are, and like for me, Isabella, just magic, just absolute magic. Like I get a feeling, a sense of wonder, and just pure, undeniable magic when I'm around Isabella. She just brings it out in me. And for you with Ryland, and sorry, you're is it a daughter you've
I've
got?
got a daughter called Thea as well. Yeah. In fact,
Thea,
it's her
yeah.
birthday today, which is why we're doing it so late.
Happy birthday, Thea, from Uncle Spelmann. So, so yeah, and for me, so the world is full of magic. What we do as magicians is we theatrically evoke a sense of wonder and astonishment. So I'm not fooling you. What I'm actually trying to do, if I do my job correctly, is I'm just allowing that element of disbelief in you where we think we know everything, and I'm just opening up that doorway, and I'm allowing you, I'm making your brain go, and it might be for a minute, might be for 30 seconds, might be for 10 seconds, but they're the best 10 seconds ever. Because I remember being a kid and watching Doug Henning and David Copperfield and Simon Drake and people like that, and going, oh God, that feels great. It feels great. And I always say this, as magicians, we are a self-sacrificing um, artists, if you like. And what I mean by that is, if you think of someone who's a concert pianist, I could be the best pianist in the world, and I could hear a young protege or another, equally fantastic pianist, and I could sit there and just go, oh God, that's beautiful. Absolutely, every note, pinpoint, beautiful piece of music. As magicians, we fall in love with magic. And then if we decide to pursue magic and learn magic, the thing that made us fall in love with magic, we now deny ourselves. Because the more we learn, the further away we get from what made us fall in love with magic, which is that sense of wonder and astonishment. So it sounds like, we're sort of holier than thou, but we kind of end up in a way being givers of magic. And if that makes sense, like we don't want to tell the secrets because, and and I know that once you learn a secret, and as magicians it's slightly different because we can learn a secret of magic and kind of go, oh God, that's beautiful, that is so clever, so simple, so wonderful, so sneaky, whatever you want to, however you want to phrase it. But we don't get, very rarely do we get that wonder that was the thing that made us enjoy it. And I think that's very unique with magic, because you can be Ricky Gervais. I love Ricky Gervais as a comedian, but you can be Ricky Gervais and still crack up listening to, Eddie Murphy or, any of the other amazing comedians that are out there. You can be the best concert pianist and listen to music and still hear it and love it. But for me now as a magician, I would say 99.9% of magic that I watch, it doesn't. I'm not wondering how it's done. I'm not that I'm not fooled by it, because again, I don't like that phrasing, but I I know how it works. I still see the beauty in it, but I don't have that beauty of going, I just don't know how, you know. So I've always loved it as a kid, and then I did the sensible thing. No one in my family is in entertainment whatsoever. So I did the sensible thing. I was a graphic designer, very good at illustration. So I was always destined to be a graphic designer or an illustrator. That was going to be my sensible job role. So I did the sensible thing of going to college. I did 6 years of design and graphic design and illustration, and I graduated, and I was a fully qualified graphic designer and illustrator. And then I thought to myself, wow, I don't want to do graphic design and illustration. I am in love with magic far too much. And where a lot of people take a gap year and they kind of go and explore the world, I said to my mum, bless her, I love my mum to bits. I just said to my mum, I said, listen, I'm going to take a year out. I was offered a job with I was straight out of college. I was offered a job with a publishing company to sort of illustrate their books. They did anything from, sort of scientific books right through to children's nursery rhymes. And because my illustration techniques were so diverse, I could do a technical drawing of a Ford Cortina, sort of 3-liter engine. But then at the same time, I could do fairies at the bottom of the garden with a beautiful little piglet or whatever you like, so I was able to do that. But then I turned the job down. It was a really weird dynamic. I was offered the job and I thought, wow, this feels far too serious. This is not, I don't know, this is right for me. Turned the job down, said to my mum, I'm going to take a year out and I'm going to just see whether or not I can make any money doing magic. And again, there are two words in show business, and I know you know what you're talking about with the business side of things as well, because I know you do really well as well. But for me, business wasn't a natural thing. I was the head in the clouds, magician, dreamer guy who just would much rather spend 3 weeks working on a trick, and then I'll sort out all the business side of things way later. So, and that was it. I ventured out into the big wide world and didn't make very much money, but made enough to pay my mum the very small weekly amount of rent that she would ask her little son to pay her, and I managed to do it. And I said, and then got after that year, and then I thought, year 2, let me try another year, mum. I've done okay-ish. And I said, the minute if I make any less than I did the first year, I'll pack it in and I'll go and get myself a proper job. And I made a little bit more money. And then I started working with someone called Simon Drake from the Secret Cabaret, who and I was a demonstrator and the post boy at Davenport's Magic Shop as well.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely. More the post boy actually than the demonstrator. So Betty Davenport used to call me Super Marc, because I'm quite crafty. I'm quite good with craft and stuff. So I would walk into Davenport's and it's no longer there, and it's so sad it's not there anymore, because like Davenport's was just like the archetype. It was perfect magic shop. Underground station tucked up in a corner, really dim, dusty kind of glass cabinets and stuff. Everything you want in a magic shop, Davenport's was it in abundance. Mm-hmm. And so I used to be in the back room of Davenport's Magic, and I used to work on I used to do sometimes a Thursday and a Friday, mainly Fridays, and Friday was their busy post day. So Betty always used to say, "Oh, Marc, if you could come in on a Friday, that'd be great." And I used to turn up, and I used to just package. I used to pack everything up and get it in the post office. And Betty used to say to me at lunchtime, "How are you getting on with the post?" I said, "Yeah, it's all done, Betty. Or everything, like, here's all the dockets and everything else. It's all on its way. Customers are going to be happy." And so I was called Super Marc at Davenport's Magic Shop, and I did that for about a year and a half. And at the same time as doing that, I was working with Simon Drake as well. So I was sort of doing illustrations for Simon, and I was his sort of right hand man for some of his shows as well. So that was a really interesting thing. Anyone that knows magic, Secret Cabaret for me still is one of the best. If it's a magic, if you haven't seen any Secret Cabaret magic shows, jump onto YouTube, type in Secret Cabaret, and I think it was so far ahead of its time that if you put that on now on Channel 4, people would go, "Have you seen this magic show on Channel 4 where the guy just?" I mean, a lot of it now would be very frowned upon because some of it was a little bit questionable. But I think that's the thing that I kind of enjoyed about it. So yeah, so that's my early days in magic, was very much busking it in London, kind of trying to get in with agents and trying to make money from doing it, subsiding, finances and all that with working at Davenport's, and then working with Simon and doing some of his gigs and that kind of thing. So all of that was before I sort of really was full-time professional.
What
Yeah.
advice would you give somebody who's a lot of people that watch this channel and newer into magic, or maybe in the first few years of being a magician, and they aspire to be a professional magician? Is there any advice that you give somebody that maybe wants to take that leap to full-time magic, or they're trying to decide whether to give up the day job, or they're now a full-time magician and they're struggling? I mean, obviously, let's just assume that the pandemic's going to end at some point soon,
Yeah.
and just assume that we're back to normal. But is there any advice that you can give?
Yeah, you know what? I would obviously my job was going to be a graphic design illustrator. That was my planned path. That's what my mum thought I was going to do. That's kind of what I thought I should do. The logical, sensible thing. But my godfather, who he passed away when he was 40 years old, I was really close with him. My mum and dad split up when I was a kid. So my godfather became very much a sort of father figure to me. But he died. He passed away when he was 40, sort of really young, in 1993. But he taught me how to play snooker. We used to play fish. We used to go fishing and everything together. All the things that you'd sort of do with your dad, I did with my godfather. And I remember one day Dave said to me, "What are you going to do when you finish college?" I went, "Well, I'll probably just do the graphic design." And he said, and I remember he grabbed my arm and just said to me, he goes, "What do you want to do?" And I went, "I'd love to do the magic." And he said, he goes, "Look," he goes, "just Mark, you're 19." I can't remember what I was, 19, 18, 19 at the time. And he said, just go for it. He goes, like, get some sort of foundations behind you. If it doesn't work out, you've got something to fall back on. But go for your dreams, because it's like, before you know it, you'll be 30, married, possibly kids on the way. And that's where it all becomes very serious, because it's not just your life anymore. It's the life of your wife and the life of your children. And that's what it's really, you can't be the dreamer anymore, So while you can dream. And I listened to his advice, and I did. And that was the thing that really pushed me, just to question everything I was doing and just go for it. So my advice to anybody, whether it's magic or not, whether it's you want to be a fine artist, a pianist, you want to be a rock star, whatever it is, whatever your dream is, I would say, think about what happens if it doesn't work. What do you do? Imagine now that that's taken away from you. They say, no matter what you do, you're not going to be a concert pianist. You're not going to be a rock star. You're not going to be a magician, right? What do you do? What's your second tier thing that might be a bit more sensible, maybe not quite as, amazing or fantastical or whatever? It might feel a bit normal, but what do you do? And for me, if I wasn't a magician and I ended up being a graphic designer, listen, I absolutely adore magic. I love what I do, and it wouldn't be the same life that I've got, but I know that I could make a life of it doing graphic design. It's not my absolute passion, but lots of people don't get to live their passions, and that's not to say that you shouldn't aim for it. I always say reach for the stars, you know what I mean? Just reach as far as you can while you're young. So that would be my advice: is just always have a backup plan, have something that that's there. And also as well, don't be in too much of a rush to kind of go I'm full-time professional, because goodness, in this, where we are at the moment, being a professional magician, only having magic as your source of income has been a tough time over the last year. But have a sort of contingency plan in place for if things don't work out. Aim for that dream, go for it, but have a contingency plan. And there's so much advice to give to people. When I started out, I had no idea. I was really good at magic. I was really good at coming up with ideas. I was really good with routines, but that doesn't mean anything. The most important thing to be in this world whatever you do in this life, and again, it supersedes magic, it goes into everything, is being somebody that people like. And that's not about not being false, but just be the best version of you that you can be. So as an example, imagine you're booking a magician. Imagine you've got two magician friends, right? Or you've got an opening, and there's two guys that and one of the guys technically is unbelievable, absolutely fantastic. Bit of an ego. You don't quite connect. And there's another guy that you could put up for the job, would do a great job, technically not as great or not as gifted, but can certainly pull the job off. And he's a lovely, lovely guy. Who are you giving the job to? I know who I'm giving the job to.
Yeah,
I'm giving the job to the guy that I really, really like, and I know he's going to do a good job. You got to have that balance. It can't be somebody that's really lovely but just awful as a magician, because that reflects on you. But so I think to myself, as much as we should refine our skills, I think in the magic industry, especially, you can it's a very niche sort of area, and I think sometimes magicians can be a little bit weird, and I'm not going to exclude myself from that area. I mean, ask Tessa, she'll tell me, and go, yeah, that Marc, bloody weirdo. But it's that kind of. So I think to myself, work on your persona, because you know this, you're a great networker. You've done loads with your slightly unusual and all the other sort of things that you've done. And you know that it's just as much about being the guy that people want to do business, not necessarily just they need to do business with you because you're so good, but they want to because you're that person. And another bit of advice, anybody you've got to just join as many agencies as you possibly can. When you start out, it doesn't matter if they're not even paying really good money, just put that to one side. Just get out there, get the office hours in. Do you know what I mean? Do the grind, do the jobs where you think, oh God, I want this job to end. This is a nightmare gig. Everyone's drunk. All of these things are learning curves. Every phase of every gig, the bad and the good. And you learn a lot more from the bad, I think, than you do from the good. Because the good ones, you kind of pat yourself on the back, come away going, yeah, I stormed it. But whereas when you have a gig that's bad, I did. I mean, I've had some horrendous gigs, and you come away going, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I do that? What a bad choice. Fancy putting that routine at the very beginning, and I've only worked it in for the last couple of weeks. What an idiot, amateur, kind of thing. So I think I'd say join lots and lots of agencies. And one thing that I learned from Tessa, my wife, and that is she used to go for loads of interviews. And she used to go for interviews where she didn't even want the job. And I used to say to her, why are you going for that interview? She goes, because it's training about interviews. I don't want the job. If they offer me the job, whatever. But I want to go for the interview. I want to hear the questions. I want to sit in their office. I want to see how they do the interview process. I want to see what my strengths are in replying to their questions. So it was training ground. So do the ones that you might not really want to do for the days when you get to the ones that are really important. If you hold out just for that really important interview and you've not done any of the training interviews, then you're going to be an amateur or underprepared going into that interview. And also, don't approach agents when it's quiet, which is something that I kind of did. I sort of would send out my brochure back in the day when we had brochures and, covering letters and all that. And I would send it out when I was quiet and it was a quiet time, sort of like that April time. That's not typically a peak month. And I would send out my stuff and you don't hear anything back. It ends up it's just another, it's like how you treat the pizza delivery thing that comes through your front door is how most agents will treat another act put in their brochure, turns up at their, they are bombarded with things. The time to approach an agency is in December or coming up to December. Why? Because all of their good magicians, their first tier magicians, are booked up out on jobs. You're much more likely, there's a lot of work going on because it's Christmas, but you get in contact with an agent and say, look, I've got some availability on my books, some dates in the diary, heard some great, and I'll tell you another thing about approaching agents as well that I've used, and it really worked for me. But when all their guys are out, they're kind of going, actually, do you know what? We have got another 3 gigs, and I don't know if John's going to be able to do it or Stuart, because they're both out on those gigs. Can you send your brochure in? Or where's your website? And you'll get much more likely to get their time at that point. When everyone's sitting around twiddling their thumbs because there's no work, do you think they're going to pick up your brochure and kind of go, oh, brilliant? They'll put it to one side. They might even file it, but it gets filed. And then, December comes along and you're tucked up in that filing cabinet, and that's it. Much better to hit them when there's a demand for the service.
That's great advice.
Another thing as well is always, I used to have this real issue with, and Tessa was the one that really pushed me. If I thought that there'd be a chance of someone not being interested, no, I'm not going to phone them up. Oh, so they can say no way. And it's like that sort of protective nature that we sometimes have, where rather not try than hear a no, because I can handle like I didn't even bother. And that's a safety net. That's a security blanket that we shroud ourselves in. It's that bubble wrap. But whereas if you turn around and you go for it, and some of the most successful people, and if you haven't heard the story of Sylvester, Stallone, and Rocky, it's absolutely, just Google it, and because he got turned down left, right, and center by so many people because the story was good and people were interested. He goes, yeah, the only sort of defining factor though is that I play the lead. And they all just went, are you kidding, right? This is great, good story. We can't listen. And I think he was offered £60,000 for the script. And they said, we'll give you £60,000 for the script. You're going to get your name in the titles. It's going to be great, whatever, a big movie company. But we've got to hand this over to Burt Reynolds or whoever was the name at the time. And he turned it down. He went like that. And he had nothing, but he turned it down. So getting no's, there's a really good analogy. And I'm really bad with no's. I always kind of go, oh, I don't like it when people say no. I can't handle it. It's like, what have I done? Why don't you like me? What's wrong? But there's a saying that's like, every no that you hear is one no closer to the yes, right? And I think that's really powerful. Just skip past those no's, whatever, brush it off, reevaluate, change things up a little bit, learn from the no's, and then you'll get closer to the yeses. But one of the things that I did was Tessa would always say to me, Marc, just badger these agents. And I thought to myself, how can I speak to an agent where it feels like we're on a bit of an even keel? So what I would do is I would send them a brochure, and I would, with a business card, and then I would drop them an email, and then I would phone up, and then when I phoned them up, and you space all this out, and when I would phone them up, I'd say, I don't know if you got this. I sent my brochure in probably about 2 weeks ago. I was performing at a job, and it was for a completely fictitious, it was for BMW at the Grosvenor, hotel, big, massive event. The CEO of the company said, I'm sure didn't we book you before through, I don't know, premiereentertainments.co.uk. And I would, and this was all in my sort of chat to the agent, premiereentertainment.co.uk. I don't know if that's actually a real agency. I'm not trying to promote them, but you get my point, right? But I would sort of say to them, so he said, David, the CEO of BMW, just turned around to me and just said, I'm sure didn't we book you through Premier Entertainment? And I was like, no, I don't think I'm registered with Premier. So then I came home, Googled you guys, saw your site, absolutely amazing site. And I thought to myself, wow, okay, so if David's talking about you guys, I thought I'd sort of just touch base and get in contact. So now effectively what you've done with that agent is you've given them a bit of a back massage and said, someone at this event was talking about you. I Googled you and looked you up, and I'm not listed with you, but I thought, wow, what a great agency. And if they're talking about you, I should get in contact, really. So you've kind of giving them a little sort of psychological back massage before you've gone, fancy doing any business, you know, that kind of thing. So I use that a lot. And that didn't always work. Nothing ever does. You know, there's no sort of dead set way of it always working. But that certainly did open up doors. And then you'd sort of build up a bit of a relationship with people and get chatting to them and stuff. So that was just some of the early techniques that I used. And then I was working with Etienne. He used to have an agency called Jumping Frogs back in the day, and I used to work with Etienne. And loved that. And I used to work with a couple of other agencies, Prelude. There was one called Contraband, and these were all really, really good agents. And the thing is that once you get in with an agent, the hardest part is getting in with them. That's the hardest bit, because they've got their 5 or 6 favorite magicians. So that's the hardest thing, is getting in with that agent. But once you're in, and just keep on badgering them, and you just do it in the nicest possible way. You do it soft. Don't be a nuisance. Space it out. Don't do daily. Don't do even weekly, but space it out fortnightly or whatever. Wait for a peak season, whatever you like, you know. But just, and that way you're getting with an agent. And once you do one job, absolutely shine. Go way out. You know, go far and above what you think you should be doing. I used to turn, if I was doing a job for a new agent, I used to turn up way in advance. I used to set up loads of stuff, I used to really go all out. And I think sometimes as magicians, we get a bit lazy, where you'd sort of go, oh, you know, I'll just do that and that and that. And I think that's where you miss out a little bit, because I think there's something so lovely about just getting to a gig an hour before and just setting something up. And sometimes you'd never use it. I remember I did a performance at a house where I was in this lovely dining room, windows all the way around it, and did the old classic of sticking a card on the other side of the glass, you know, for a trick. I won't, you know, just because we won't go into details, but you can imagine. And never got to use it. So somewhere there's a window cleaner just kind of going, why is there a card on the other side of this glass? But it was there, you know, if I needed it to be there. So that was it. That was my early days in magic, as you know. And that's kind of the advice I'd give to people, is have a backup plan, get in with as many agencies as you possibly can, and go and meet these people as well. And there was one agency that I really wanted to get in with, and they were up in Birmingham. And I didn't want to kind of go, listen, I'm in London, I'm going to come up to Birmingham to see you, because that sounds a little bit, really, right? So what I would do is, if I was, I made out that I was doing a gig in Birmingham. So I got in contact with them. I said, look, your name has been mentioned to me, and I've looked you up. I'm actually performing at the NEC on Friday, and I just wanted, before or after lunchtime, is it, if I was to pop in and just introduce myself? I work up in Birmingham and Manchester a lot, and a lot of the time you'll get those people that I always used to throw a line in where I go, I'll even bring coffee or whatever, you know, just to be nice and funny. And with this agency in Birmingham, I travelled all the way up to Birmingham, pretended that I was doing this job at the NEC. Oh yeah, it went really well. I've just driven up here just to come in your offices to say hello and get in with you, you know. But that's what you got to do. And it's like, if it's, you know, you've got to put the work in, really. If you want the rewards, you got to put the work in. And you know, as well as anybody, the more you put in, the more you'll get out of it, you know.
I think you're right. It's thinking outside the box and going the extra mile. One thing I used to do with agents, by the way, is I used to find out the names of all of the staff that worked in the agency, and then set up a Facebook advertising campaign. But instead of advertising to everybody, advertising specifically to those people on Facebook.
Brilliant.
So I paid nothing for the ad, because hardly anybody was, it was like an ad for about 15 people. But after I approached an agency, I would set the ad up, and then all that happens is every single person that works in that agency, every time they go on Facebook, they see an ad for me. And it's kind of like, I'm almost like following them around.
That's gold dust. You've just given away absolute gold dust there. My stuff is here and there. You've just given away gold dust, Craig. But yeah, so that's it, really. I mean, it's one of those things. It's a niche industry that we work in. very unusual industry that we work in. And also as well now, agencies now, the irony is now agencies are, I don't know, it's just not as much of a criteria. It's not so fundamental that you are with agencies now. When I was starting out, that's kind of how it was done. Now it's all Google AdWords and that kind of thing, and that's a real challenge in itself because you've got to put the investment in. I think there was one December, I think it was back in 2007, and my I think it was November, December, Google AdWords. I think it was about. It's not even. It's probably not a lot to a lot of businesses, but for me, it was like it was about £8,500 I spent over November and December. But November and I don't know if you can hear that. There is a helicopter flying above me just here. You might have just got that on the mic, but it was about £8,500 I spent on Google AdWords, but it set me up right up until the crash in 2008. But it sort of set me up, and when I balanced the scales, I went, "That's my investment, and that's what I made back from it," and it superseded it. So it was a worthwhile investment. I probably overspent, I would say, on Google AdWords, but so it's an ever changing thing, and I think having done Britain's Got Talent, now I'm kind of a little bit out of that world. And there's pros and cons to that as well. There are pros and cons to that. There's pros in that I don't have to worry about Google AdWords and stuff like that anymore. I've got an agent who kind of just phones me up and says these people want you over here and can you do it? But the downside is, and I'm not, I really did love. I don't do as much close-up magic as I used to do anymore. A lot of my stuff is on stage now, and I love stage performances. But there is something I absolutely adored about doing close-up. A really good close-up gig, and also multi-magician gigs. I used to love those. Like 3 or 4 magicians, and you're all kind of bouncing off of each other and loading a card in a bottle for your mate who's on table 6 and stuff like that, and all that kind of camaraderie. We're doing gigs like that, so I haven't experienced that for a good old while now. But yeah, it's.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about that. I was going to say, do you have any advice? Because obviously you've done a lot of close-up magic in your career, but I do think of you even before Britain's Got Talent. I think of you as a stage performer. Do you have any advice for? I know it's the holy grail for a lot of magicians. They want to be able to perform on stage, and a lot of magicians are scared. They're fine going up to 2 or 3 people in a restaurant or in a function or a mix and mingle type situation, but walking out cold to 300-400 people at a corporate event where they haven't seen you've got to win them over. It scares the hell out of them. And so many people want to be a stage magician and don't. To someone who's transitioned very successfully into that arena, is there something that you can say about that?
100%. My advice is, just like anything we do in life, you wouldn't be on your tricycle. I mean, I only reference this because Isabella's actually learning how to ride a bike without stabilizers at the moment, so it's kind of relevant, right? But you don't go from riding a tricycle to jumping on a bike and going down a hill or with no stabilizers or anything. You don't do that. You kind of learn your balance and you take your time and you bit by bit, and eventually all of a sudden, it might be 6 months or whatever. And I think the same thing applies to everything. I mean, whether you're a cook or, again, the concert pianist, there's certain pieces of music that are far easier to play than others. So for me, when I started going, when I worked with Simon Drake, and we were doing a lot of gigs, I had that sort of stage exposure, but the luxury of being by the side of Simon. So I would have, ironically, I'd have a mask on, like bloody X. I'd have a mask on, a top hat, and it was a skull's mask. So I used to be like a henchman on stage with Simon, so getting people out of the audience and laying them down on the props and stuff like that. I don't know if you've ever seen Simon's work, but it's all very much in that sort of very sort of surreal, it's almost Beetlejuice and that kind of oddity, that sort of slightly dark vibe. So that was my character. Now, the advantage of doing that was you know, I could be on stage and get that feel of having lots of eyes on you, but without having the pressure of being the act. I was an assistant effectively. So that was one way of doing it. But also when I sort of stepped out onto stage, I did it in bits. I never ran before I could walk. So for me, I think when you're doing a wedding, and I remember a good friend of mine is a guy called Luch, who's a mind reader.
Nottingham.
I've been Nottingham, yeah. So Luch is a really good friend of mine. I remember Luch. We've had conversations for years and years and years. I remember when Luch was a close-up. I mean, I remember before he was even professional, he was just kind of doing the odd gig here and there, just close-up. And then he ventured out into the big wide world and became. He used to teach art and design at a young offenders institution. I don't know if it was in Nottingham, but around those ways. And magic and performing mentalism was close up was very much a sort of little moonlighting gig for him on the odd Sunday or Saturday, you know, sort of however often. But then we were talking about sort of doing sort of stage performances and how do you build up the courage to stand in front of a room full of people and not just that sort of like 5 or 6 people around a table or at a drinks reception. And I said to him, look, listen, you know, when you're at a wedding or something like that, have it as a little bonus thing. Just say to them, look, at the end of the wedding, if you want, just before my finale, if you like, is I get the best man, the best man and the groom up on the stage, and the bride and maybe the maid of honor, and I said just do anything, sneak thief, whatever you want, but just something super easy. It feels like a little sort of like a finale, you know, like a little sort of a highlight, if you like, before you wave goodbye and say goodbye to everyone. And what you've done in that moment is you've got 7 minutes of stage experience. And again, sorry, helicopter right above me. I live in North London. It's a horrible area with lots of violence. So there's probably criminals running around or whatever. It's actually not that bad. So yeah, so you've got 7 minutes thereabouts of experience of not. And it's funny because we think of being a stage performer by standing on a stage, and that's not the case. Being a stage performer is that's just a term of being, oh, you're on a stage, you know. But for me, stage performances are for a big group of people where you are not even a parlors. I would say up to sort of 20-30 people could be a parlor performance, and I love parlor performances. I still do. One of my favorite performances is parlor performances. But in that moment, you've now got in that 7 minutes of what Luch would do, as an example, at the end of a wedding, getting, you know, the bride and groom or whatever up on stage, or not on stage, theoretically stage, a hypothetical stage, an area where everyone's watching. What you've done now is you've learned about projecting your voice, people not being able to hear you, might not have a microphone, how to engage with everyone and keep an eye on everyone. And Juan Tamariz has got a lovely thing and a way of connecting. And he said, imagine every single person in front of you, you've got a line of invisible thread to each person's eyes and try and just connect. Like not necessarily in order, but just connect with everyone just for a brief second. And what that does is it connects you in that weird detached moment with every audience member that you've got there. Rather than being very focused on just the person on stage. In actual fact, you know, the person that you're on stage with really is the person you look at least. It should be a lot of it's like for the people in the audience, this person's on stage with you, they're in that zone. So that would be my thing, is just try. And also do things for friends and family. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, it just get used to doing it. You know, it's, you know, I actually found in my early days the hardest people to perform for was friends and family. I just didn't like it. I found it much easier to be in a room full of complete and utter strangers and then become my persona. And this is another thing as well about when you're a performer, whether you're close up or parlor or whatever. I think we all have personas. Now, obviously, if you're a Max Maven, you are really going into a persona. You know, you if you're X, you're totally going into a persona. I mean, it's completely couldn't be any further. That's the extremities of it. A Jeff McBride with the masks or something like that. You know, that's a real persona. But I think even your like Derren Brown goes on stage and there's just a little bit more energy, a little bit more vibrance, a little bit more authority in the way that he might speak or conduct himself. And that is us becoming a slightly amplified version of ourselves. And even that is a little bit of a persona, our stage personas. And I found that really difficult to do with friends and family because they know Marc.
Mm.
No one else does. I can walk into a room full of strangers and they have no idea who I am. So I can walk on that stage or in that room and do a parlor performance or whatever, or that group of people at the Closeup gig, and I can be whatever I want to be. And they can only judge me on who the person that they've met, who performs, and then who leaves. Whereas doing it for friends and family all felt a bit weird for me. You know, I kind of, if I perform for friends and family, which I kind of do occasionally, not that often, but if I do, totally different performer to who you would see on a gig. So I just think it's like anything, just get that experience in whatever way you can. Do some stuff for free. Don't, you know, like if you're doing a close-up gig, throw it in there at the end, complimentary. You know, if you feel the vibe is right. I mean, I've done gigs where I would be at a gig and I think to myself, God, this is the perfect. I might have done close up around a dining table, and I've always with agents and event organizers a lot of the time are the worst people because they have a formula. They kind of go, yeah, close up magician, can you do 2 hours? And you kind of go, yeah, sure. And you get the contract come through and then it's really minimal with the detail. You turn up to the gig and then you go, there's 12 people around a dining table, 2 hours of close up magic, 12 people around a dining table. Much better and more exclusive in a way to kind of say, let them chat and have their lovely dinner and getting to see each other again. And once everyone's finished their desserts and they're pouring that glass of port with the cheeses or, you know, a bottle of wine or something at the end, have a parlor performance. You know, 35, 40-minute parlor performance at the end, far more exclusive for that 12 people around a table. So a lot of the time, I've done gigs where I've turned up and it has been exactly that vibe, like 2 hours, you know, back in the day, 2 hours of close-up magic for, you know, sort of 15 people. And you're going, this is just not great. It's just not going to work. So I would do a little bit of magic. And a lot of the time I used to just turn around and say, look, what might be a really nice idea is I'll let you guys eat. And then why don't I do a performance to all of you? And it would be 15 people, but it's one step up from doing close-up magic. So you're getting a step up. It's like, you know, taking the stabilizers off the bike. You know, you're starting to learn. And that then when you walk out on stage, and you are in front of 500 people or 1,000 people or whatever, or you're standing on stage at Britain's Got Talent or whatever it is you're doing, you now are in a position where it's just people, you know. But you've gradually worked your way to that point. Don't just do it because you will just rabbit in the headlights. You know.
And I do find it's a lot easier walking out and performing on stage if you've done close up first. The hardest job is when you walk out on stage cold. If you can upsell somebody on having a little cabaret show at the end of a close-up job, you've already won those people over when you've done the close-up. They love you when you walk out.
110%, absolutely on the money. One of the things that I love doing, and I would do close-up at the drinks reception, even if I wasn't paid to do it. So if I was paid to do a cabaret, you know what it's like. You're doing a cabaret performance, and what happens is, you know, you've got to be there at 4 o'clock because they want a sound check anyway. So what normally happens is you turn up to the gig, you do the sound check, and you either go and sit in your car and just have a snooze or watch a movie on the iPod or whatever it was back in the day. And then you'd wait for sort of like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you'd venture in and just have a little look in the room and see they're finishing their starters and they're running a bit late, and then you'd get ready for your cabaret. And I got to a point where I thought to myself, you know what, I want to go in and meet these people. And the reason why I wanted to do it was for a number of reasons. One, and the main reason, was because I could establish my credentials, and I didn't do a big hoo-ha. I wouldn't go around everyone. But what I would do is I'd go around a group of people and I would find, like, the minute I've got the guy that turns and goes, oh, I love magic, absolutely love it, that's brilliant. Yeah, come on, you do another one or whatever. I now go, brilliant. Here's my friend. This is the guy who I'm going to get up on stage with me because he's compliant. He knows me. He's going to be comfortable to come up on stage because we've had a really good time. He's seen a bit of magic, and he's going to be perfect on stage. He's not going to be the awkward person on stage, and I always say this to people as well, there are three types of people. When you look out into an audience, you're going to get someone up on stage. There are three types. The person who puts their hand up to join you, don't choose them. They're too keen, right? And that normally means they're the office joker, the prankster, whatever, and they're going to come up and they want to have a bit of a giggle, and sometimes it's at your expense. And there's nothing worse than battling for centre stage with one of the guys out of the audience. And then you'll get the other person who's absolutely petrified. Don't get them up on stage, because it absolutely, people can feel it, and it just feels, oh God, it's awkward. You want the person that's neither here nor there, the kind of middle ground, you know, and that takes, and the only way that you can actually work that out is it's time. It's just time. And I don't always make the right. I would say 99% of the time I do, but sometimes you kind of go, yeah, probably shouldn't have got him up, you know. But that is something that only comes with time, and you can spot them. But absolutely, that turning up to a gig, you're there anyway. Do a little bit of close up at the drinks reception. What does it do? It gives you a heads up, establishes who you might get up on stage. And in my stage performances, I think all in all, I'd probably have about 6 people up throughout the entire performance. You know, I'd have one person up for one routine I did with the SP cards. Another person, 3 people would come up for a sort of like oh my God, my brain, like a 3 envelope test type performance. And then another couple would come up for a compatibility kind of connection sort of PK. Always loved PK touches, hence X doing PK touches. But you know, that kind of thing. But when you do that, when you do what we've just discussed, it gives you a heads up as to who those people potentially are going to be that are going to come up and join you on stage. 2, the client. Do you think the client's annoyed that you've done close up in the drinks reception? No, that client is going, "Oh my God, brilliant! Did you see what he was doing at the drinks reception? That is amazing." What happened if it's through an agency? What happens then? He was amazing. Even went round the drinks reception as well. It was fantastic. Everyone was talking about it. Absolutely loved it. Now that agent's going, well, Marc's the one to book again because the client absolutely loved him. So there's no loss. There's absolutely nothing to lose, and you're not sitting in your car twiddling your thumbs, eating a Gingsters, waiting to go to the gig. You know.
Totally, completely agree with you. Now, in a minute, I want to start talking about creativity, because you've created a lot of magic. But there's one other thing that I want to talk about first,
Cool.
and I hear this a lot on forums, on Facebook, and also I get this question a lot on the channel: magic versus mentalism. Now, there is the school of thought that if you are a mentalist, you shouldn't perform magic. Now, I know that you are first and foremost a lover of magic, not just mentalism, but just magic in general. I know that you are. But I also know that you spent a long time within your career focusing on kind of hardcore mentalism. A lot of people know you as a mentalist, but you know, we saw, and we're going to talk about Britain's Got Talent later on, but we saw a lot of the stuff that you were doing was kind of magic-y based, you know, especially when you change places and all that sort of stuff. So what's your opinion on, you know, as a mentalist, is it okay to perform magic, or does it devalue the magic? Devalue the mentalism and make people look down on it? And what made you decide to go into mentalism versus magic? And
I think very quickly, in terms of, I've always loved magic. I mean, magic's where I came from, so magic is the thing. So, you know, we were speaking before we were rolling, and we were talking about David Roth, who sadly passed away recently. But you know, like the coin books, you know, David Roth, you know, you know, all these incredible books, you know, the L&L DVDs, all of the things that he'd done, and classic palming coins, and his coins across. I used to perform his coins across, you know, with the thing that you sometimes find on the beach, you know, and absolutely loved it. So I absolutely adore magic. One of my favorite tricks, I remember, weird story actually. One of my favorite tricks, I remember watching David Copperfield, and it was his Niagara Falls special, and he pulled out a pencil and a note. And he did what you and I know is by a gentleman called Timothy Wenk, and he did this trick, and I remember going, "Oh my God, I love that trick!" It was just so clear and kind of going, well, hang on a minute, hold on. And that was one of the tricks out of all the things. I say that I can work everything out, but I thought to myself, I'm on a mission to work this out because it wasn't available, right? Because when David Copperfield buys the rights to a trick on one of his specials, I think the kind of thing, like even with Jay Sankey with Airtight and stuff like that, you would kind of Copperfield would hold on to the rights for it for 3 years or something, and then after that you could release it and then say as seen on date, but you couldn't say that immediately after the special. And I remember watching it, and I had a dodgy version on VHS, and it was dubbed in German because it was on a channel called RTL in Germany, and someone had sent me this tape, said, "Oh, I taped you the David Copperfield special." Put it on, saw him doing this thing with a pencil, blown away, loved it. I thought it was so pure, so simple. The timing to the music, it was beautiful. Copperfield always does stuff just on point, especially in those days. He was on point, like you couldn't fault it. And I worked it out. I had a couple of prototypes that I just would so not the right way. Just if you saw some of my drawings, and one day I'll show you one of my little books, my notebooks with these random drawings of pencils and stuff. But then I worked it out, and I thought, hang on a minute, I've got this. I'm overcomplicating it, and I worked exactly what it is. I made it out of I don't want to go into methods and that because of again, but I made it. You know what I'm talking about, and some of the viewers will know what I'm talking about. But I made one out of a beer can, because it's got to be super thin, whatever. And I flattened out a beer can, scored it with a Stanley knife, and I ended up making exactly what it is. And then I was so proud of myself, going, I've worked it out. Yep, there you go. Could do it exactly as Copperfield did it. Then I got the job at Davenport's, and then Betty turned around to me and said, "Oh, Marc, we've got something new that's just come in," and here it is. And it was now mass produced for everyone, and I was like, "Great!" Like I just spent all that time making up these prototypes. But so I've always loved magic. I mean, I mentioned to you the card box, the Paul Daniels card case. Always loved magic, So I fell in love with magic, but then I naturally found I really fell in love with mentalism as well. And I think partly because of Uri Geller. Uri Geller was doing things on television when I was sort of like in my sort of late, well, just before I was a teenager, sort of late 70s, early 80s. Uri Geller was doing things that were just not, it wasn't magic. It was like, what is this, And I really found that really interesting. I love the idea of bending spoons and metal and all that kind of stuff, and genuinely trying to do it. I remember my dad watching me watching. I can't remember the show, but Uri Geller was on, and I've got a teaspoon. I'm rubbing it, and my dad just looking at me like, just what have I done? What are you doing? Kind of thing. So I've always had that sort of relationship with magic, and magic's never gone. It's always been here. And even when I started sort of going, right, I'm going to go down this mentalism route, and this was sort of like mid 90s, I'd say like 90 sort of 6, 97, I was really, really heavily into mentalism. And I did a workshop with Larry Becker at the back of Davenport's in their little demon club. And Larry Becker did a workshop, and it was like £250 to join his workshop. So there was 4 of us at his workshop. And I remember spending the whole day with Larry Becker and just falling more and more in love with mentalism, and the feeling. I think the difference between magic and mentalism, and it still exists to this day to a degree, and that is that with mentalism, there's still that kind of like, what is that you're doing kind of vibe to, if you're a good mentalist. And I think good mentalism is not about whether or not you use cards or you use ESP cards or you don't do this or you don't do that. I think good mentalism is purely on persona. It's all about your persona. And if you look at someone like, I remember when David Blaine came out, and I was one of the people that I really liked his first special. I didn't care that it was magic, that I knew exactly how it was done or whatever. It didn't matter to me. It was the reactions that it got. And if anything, it made me sort of simplify, like, don't overcomplicate stuff, Marc. Just remember the effect on the people. That's what's important. That's the most important. Obviously, good technique and good presentation is good. And I think Blaine in those days was kind of criticized for he didn't have any patter or presentation. But then my argument with that would be he did, but just not in the conventional sense. By being a bit weird and the man who fell to earth, sort of David Bowie-esque, not saying anything, I think is just as much a presentation as going into a full-on presentation about how your granddad, you know, showed you your first 21 card trick or whatever, and you know, it's all presentational. It's just whether or not you like it or not. So but yeah, so I remember watching David Blaine in the early days, and obviously I was a gigging magician at the time, so I'm out doing the gigs. And I remember Blaine in his second special, Mystery Man, where he went to Haiti, all dressed in black. This is where he kind of got a bit darker. And he went to Haiti, and there was a bit where he's got these kids either side of him, and he did the multiplying sponge balls. He's got a little kid, and he just says to the kid, "Open up your hands like this," and the kid goes like this, and all of these sponge balls came out. Now here's David Blaine doing sponge balls. But the vibe that I was getting when I was out gigging and performing, people were saying to me, you know, educated members of the public were saying, that Blaine guy, though, there's something a bit different about him, though, isn't there? I mean, is it all tricks with him, or is it something, because he's just a bit weird, isn't he? So it didn't matter that he was doing sponge balls. They overlooked that because his persona superseded it. And that's what I think. I think that, you know, I really like, even if you book me now, if you book me to do a sort of stage performance as myself on stage, I am 99.9% mentalism, and it's just I'm comfortable with that on stage. If you book me close up, there was a period of time where I only about 6 months where I was really like, no, I'll only do mentalism, you know, like that's the only thing I'll do, mentalism, you know, and I just didn't like it. I really, metal bending's not mind reading. So if I bend spoons or bend a coin, that's not mind reading. You know, if you want to, some people might think it's psychic-y or psychic magic, but it's not. It's not mentalism. You know, it's a trick. You know, and I remember doing a gig. I had a really good friend of mine at the time was a guy called the Grey Man, a guy called Philip Escoffi. We were doing a gig down in London, down in the city, and I was booked, and they said, "Oh look, we've got the Grey Man, Philip Escoffi, doing all mind reading. So can you just do magic?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it was close up, mix and mingle, and I was like, "Yeah, fine, I'm good with that." So I do one of my favourite card tricks ever to do is I do a variation on the Chicago opener. And I've always loved the Chicago opener, but you know, I don't do the Hindu false and stuff. I just sort of upgraded it slightly where I think it needed a bit of tweaking and stuff. And it's always been one of my favorite tricks to do. And so I was doing that. I was doing metal bending, just spoons. And I've always been an advocate that if I'm going to bend spoons, I want them to be spoons that if I gave them to you, you would kind of go, "Oh right, okay, that's, you know." And that's why I know Morgan Strebler really well from back in the day when he had a residency in Vegas, and I love the look of liquid metal, but I never really I always felt the forks. I would find it hard to cut a jacket potato with one of those forks, if that makes sense. So it always, I sort of steered away from them slightly, but it's beautiful. I mean, that fork with the prongs and everything else is brilliant. But I've always kind of gone for, you know, sort of doing things with spoons that are sort of harder to bend. So I was doing metal bending, effectively a sort of variant on Chicago opener, and an ESP routine. So not an ESP routine. Have you ever seen Fuse, where you hold a piece of paper and you light it with an incense stick or a lighter and it burns out? So I was doing that. And I had groups of people around me, just as I was holding up the spoons and twists and all that kind of stuff was happening. And people just absolutely like freaking out, and a really good gig. And my friend Philip at the time, he was like revealing someone's name. Now, mentalism is incredibly, incredibly powerful, but a lot of the time it's very focused, where that, you know, like if I reveal your first crush was a girl called Helen when you were 12 years old at school, even the other people can kind of go, "Oh my God, that's amazing that he knew that it was Helen." But for you, it's got like this thing of, oh my god, I mean, he just dragged me to a thought that I hadn't had for so long. But it's a lot more focused on you. Whereas if I'm standing there, universal object of a spoon, and it's twisting and bending, everyone knows the impossibility of that, and so effectively the effect is for everyone, if you like. And that's why I kind of sort of didn't want to do that sort of and I also, as well, I found the mentalism community a little bit, um I don't know what the word would be. I just found that they were a little bit, I think they missed the point a little bit. So if you've got a 17-year-old kid, I say that it sounds derogatory, a 17-year-old person going around a gig saying that they've done 3 years of psychology and they can read your body language and that's how they're reading your mind. No, you haven't. Yeah, you haven't really, have you? Do you know what I mean? Right? Let's not kid ourselves. And so for me, I also, as well, I always felt to myself, it just felt a little bit elitist, I think, in some ways, where it was like, I won't use playing cards because people will think I'm doing tricks. And I think to myself, and maybe this is a thing of being in the UK. I think in other parts of the world, you might be able to get away with that. But I think I mean, even the great Derren Brown, who I think is amazing. I mean, what a performer Derren is. But even Derren Brown, with the platform of television, had to take a bit of a backward step from the psychology because he was challenged by a journalist who wrote for The Sun, who said, I will challenge you to use your psychological techniques, your neuro-linguistic programming and body language techniques and whatever, and I will donate, if you can do it, I will successfully do it, I will donate £60,000 to charity. So then after this and it became quite a public thing. And then after that, you saw a lot of the beginning intro to Derren's programs started off with, I fuse magic, hypnosis, showmanship. I can't remember the exact terminology, but it was a little bit of a disclaimer saying, look, some of this is a bit of magic as well. So I just I really like the David Berggas approach, and that is, he's just a man of mystery. And I also loved Uri Geller's approach. I mean, I don't agree with the whole psychic thing, but I think Geller was much more about, it's not about me, it's about us together. These amazing things happen. And I never liked the psychic approach, but I just like that analogy of being, I just weird things happen, around, whether it's magic or whatever. And I tell you why as well that I kind of sort of did that a little bit as well. And that was because I found that I would turn up to a gig, and when you're doing a close-up gig, and I know, you do a wedding, and you could go up to a group of ladies, and they're not going to be as interested in maybe the card trick as if you were doing a pseudo reading, a bit of mentalism or something. They'd much more gravitate towards that kind of thing. And equally, you might go over to another group of lads, guys, got the beers out and stuff like that, and they might gravitate much more to the card stuff and the here's how you treat your cards, guys, and these are some of the techniques that I've learned. And and that's it. And for me, I think being a close-up performer, and this is why I kind of on stage I feel much more comfortable doing the mentalism. But even now, if I do close-up, even now, I would still kind of semi-cater for the groups that I'm with. Do you know what I mean? I feel as though you're a wandering showman when you're doing close-up. I mean, I don't do that much close-up anymore, but you're a wandering showman. So that was my thing with mentalism. I kind of just I love it as a genre, but I'm not going to be tied to it. And I'm not going to kid myself that just because I'm not using a deck of playing cards, that people are going to give me, are going to credit me with being an authentic mind reader, because he didn't use cards. That guy did. And so he's clearly a fraudulent mind reader, whereas that guy didn't use cards. So and I would much rather use cards that people know than going, here's some ESP cards that you've never heard of, or you might vaguely remember from the beginning of Ghostbusters. So, there's certain magic that I think you can and can't do. I think that if you look at someone like Graham Jolly, I love Graham. I think he's hilarious. But I don't think anyone walks away going, well, he can really read minds. But what's the most important thing? people were entertained. And also, even again, the great Derren Brown had a Lysander floating table and did it on one of his shows with a member of the audience. I mean, he's floating a table with a cloth,
Yeah.
and it's Derren Brown. No one's turned around after watching that show and gone, "Oh, well, that's killed it. Clearly not a real mind reader." Do you know what I mean? So I just think we get a bit stuck with that kind of thing, and for me,
I remember.
I never wanted to shoehorn myself in that way. I just, if something's beautiful or wonderful or intriguing or whatever, then I want to be able to do it. And there's some magic that just doesn't suit me. I give it to other people, you know, it's whatever, you know. But so yeah, so that was my thing. So that's a really long answer to a
No, it's great. I'm loving your answers. I remember on that subject watching Richard Osterland perform, and he was doing some of the most stunning mind reading and the stunning mentalism I've ever seen. And then he goes into a linking fingerings routine, and no one questioned it. No one questioned it. It was just his act, and that was what he was doing. It
you
didn't
know,
value what was happening after he linked the fingerings together.
100%. Dunninger, I mean, obviously, and this is back in the day when Dunninger was really thought to be this super mind. And I think that if you are a good performer, you are able to transition from thing to thing. So I could do, with my Chicago opener, I won't bore people with it because I know some of the people might not be into this sort of stuff. But Chicago opener, Chicago opener. So for those that don't know, Chicago opener, someone chooses a card, goes back inside the pack, then it's a different color. You show that mysteriously there's an odd backed card in the deck. You turn it over and it's their card. Everyone goes, "Oh my god, that's it's amazing!" And then you go, "Let me do it again. Let's try it again." And you do it again, and it doesn't work. But then the card that was originally the odd, and it's super like transposition changes, right? Anyway, look it up. There's loads of examples on YouTube, right? What I did was I wanted to frame it slightly differently. So what I did was, first of all, I thought I'll add a burn to the back of the card instead of it being a change of color. And then I would add an element of fire. So I used to hold my hand up, and there's a thing you can do with the lighter where you can hold it up against your palm, and it looks like your palm should really be burning surely at that point with the flame, but it doesn't because of gravity of heat is up here and etc. science, whatever. So I would say to someone, take a card out of the pack. I'm going to show you the difference between magic and mind reading. And I'd say, right, just grab a card out, from the pack. And it's really important. I don't see it. Pop it back inside the pack. And I'd say, look, just imagine my hand is your card. Just imagine. I know it's a bit odd, but just a bit Twin Peaks, but just imagine my hand as being your card. I'll take a lighter out, hold the lighter up to the palm of my hand and say, imagine now, the reason why I don't feel a burn is because I'm doing exactly what you're doing. I'm visualizing my hand as being your card. So if my hand doesn't burn, what do you think does? And then now they'd all sort of go, the card? And I'd go, well, let's have a look. That's a good idea, actually. Now I'd spread through the cards. There'd be one card in the pack with a burn. Turn it over. It's their card. Everyone goes, oh my God, that's amazing, right? And at that point, I'd say, but look, I said to you, I'm going to show you the difference between magic and mind reading. And there's a question you get asked a lot of the time is, what would have happened if you'd have changed your mind at the beginning? And you know, and I know that with Chicago, they can change their mind at the very beginning, right? So I'd say, what would have happened if you'd have changed your mind? Now, look, let's give it a go. Let's try it. Okay. I don't normally do this, but let's try it. Okay. So do me a favor, just say the word stop and then stop on a card or whatever. And I'd say, look, now I'll show you, because last time we did the whole thing with the burn, but if you took a different card or thought of a different card, maybe I'd have a different ending. So let me show you what it would look like if I was reading your mind. So now I'd sort of say, look, just imagine I'm holding your card in my hand. Imagine right here, imagine holding it at the fingertips. And imagine I could see through your eyes for a moment. I see what you see. So imagine. So now I'd look at the card, I'd look back at them and I'd say, I see a red card. And they'd go, yeah. And I go, yes, 50-50. It's just a guess. So hearts, yes? Yeah, again, 50-50. It's heart or diamond. So anyone could do that. And then I'd basically get down to the card and then they'd go, oh my God, that's amazing. And then I'd go, but look, I love to bring things full circle. Watch the card, the imaginary card between my fingers. And I slowly bring my hand down onto the card that's on the table. And as my hand approaches it, everyone goes, no way, no, 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 no. Comes down, gets that card off the table with the burn across it, lift it up and show it as now that card. I can't tell you how many gigs I've got through that because of that trick, right? Because it's got all elements to it: a bit of fire, a bit of flames, a bit of a burn, a bit of this, a bit of that, and a bit of mind reading, whatever. But no one ever thought that I wasn't mind reading at that point. They go, "How does he know that? How does he know?" It must be the way that you definitely did do something. You smiled when he said hearts. So they credit you with this mind reading ability, and clearly I'm not mind reading. You know I'm not mind reading. I know I'm not mind reading, but they credit you with it. So for me, I think there are certain tricks you can and can't do. I wouldn't bring out Dippy Duck, and then do a great trick. Don't get me wrong, but I just think that might be too much of a genre split, if you like. But odd kind of cool magic, even like, the torn corner off of a card, even something like, I mean, effectively, I've never done it, but you could effectively get misled, and you could say this is all about your perception. None of what you're going to see is real, but if I say it and I condition you, maybe I can alter your perception of what you're seeing. So if I said to you right now that pencil goes right through that note, you would swear blind it's going through. Even if I said to you, hear it rip, you would be absolutely convinced you heard it rip, but it's all your perception. It's not the case, because it really isn't ripping. There's no hole, there's no rip. It's just because I'm suggesting these things to you. Now, that's, I wouldn't use it as a mentalism piece, but you can see how you could steer it to then fitting in with, oh, it's perception. And I think a trick like Triumph, I love Triumph, but Triumph is another one that you could do that. The perception is that I'm shuffling these cards face up and face down. That's what I want you to think, but I'm not. You perceive that to be the case, and they go, no, 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 no. And the lovely thing about doing stuff like that is they convince themselves even further. They kind of go, no, 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 you shuffled them face up, face out, and then you go, no, 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 look, and you spread them and whatever, So yeah, so I think that magic and mentalism could happily coexist. They're so closely interlinked, Um, Again, another loose example is I used to do the hopping. Is it no, not the hopping half? Is it the hopping half? The copper and the silver coin in the hand.
Yeah. Hopping
Yeah,
half.
hopping half, right? So I used to do that about perception. I would say, look, this is only about perception. And I say, look, if I showed you two coins and I reached inside, your reality would be that there's only the one coin left. But what about if I never took the coin? And they go, no, but you did. I go, no, but I didn't. And it's just wording can change how a routine can feel. It doesn't work with everything, but it works with a lot more than you'd imagine. So now that bridge between mentalism and magic can be, blurred. That line between the two can be heavily blurred just by the language that you use and by your persona as well. And that's why David Blaine can do it. That's why Derren Brown can do it. That's why the great David Berglas could do it, because they've got that strong persona and Dunninger, they can blur that line between, and that's what I've always wanted to do, because I love magic too much to kind of go, no, 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 I'm only about billets and centre tears and clever wallets.
That's a fantastic answer to that question, and it actually leads me on to the next question, because what you were talking about there towards the end is creativity. Being creative enough to take a trick that everybody's done, Red Hot Mama, Chicago Open, or what you want to call it, and completely turn it on its head and make it so that it's completely your own and it's completely unique. Now, creating magic, whether it be technically or from a presentational point of view, it's also something that a lot of magicians want to learn to do, whether it's creating magic for themselves or it's creating magic to sell ultimately. Everybody wants to have their act unique, and I think it's because when you come into magic, there are certain people that are put on pillars, and those are the creators of magic, and everybody who's new to magic goes, oh, I want to be that guy, I want to be creating the magic. Now, as somebody who has spent a lot of time creating magic to sell and lecturing to magicians all over the world, I suppose my question is twofold. One, what made you decide to start creating magic to sell? Because you didn't need to, Marc, because even before BGT, you were super successful. You were with the top agents, you were getting the top work. It's not like you needed the money from going out and, selling these tricks. You could keep them to yourself, that nobody else was doing them. So what made you decide to start releasing magic? And also, is there any advice on how to create magic?
Yeah, so I think there are three. Ironically, there's like the audience. There's three people in the audience. There's three different types of performer or magician. So you get someone like Jim Steinmeier, who is an absolute magical genius, but he's not going to walk out on stage and do a performance. You know, he's very much a creator, an engineer of the impossible, if you like. And that would be someone like a Jim Steinmeier, and then you'll get someone who is an amazing performer but doesn't create anything. So as an example, and I'm not saying that Graham Jolly, I'm only singing the praises of someone like Graham Jolly because I do find him absolutely hilarious, but Graham Jolly really performs a lot of off the shelf kind of mentalism, but it's his persona and his ability to perform. It doesn't matter. It almost doesn't really matter what he's doing, you know, because his persona and his performances are so strong. So there are three types of people. You get the people that don't create but are very creative with their performances and their personas. Then you get the people that are super creative by engineering these things of the impossible, if you like, but would never go out and perform them. And then you get those people. Another person like Angelo Carbone is just the sweetest, quietest, but what a brain he's got. Some of this, he shows you stuff, and you gotta go, where did you? What are you doing? How do you think of that? You know, it's brilliant, right? You know. So, and then you get the people that are in the middle, and I fall into the middle. I've always I love performing, and for me, creating a piece of magic and then getting to perform it, for me, is like sort of cooking. It's like cooking a recipe that you never taste, you know. And for me, so I love performing and doing some of the BGT stuff, and especially my audition in 2018. You know, with the crayon and all of that stuff was I built that stuff. You know, so it was all my background in graphic design, like, you know, the crayon stuff, and you know, the Rubik's cube, you know, in its lovely packaging, was all part and parcel of just me sitting there and sticking stuff together and coming up with it, and to then perform it and obviously have that level of exposure with it. Unfortunately, everyone knows how it works now, but you know, no, never mind. But you know, so I love being, I'm that middle guy, if you like, and I think you are as well. You know, I think, you know, you love to perform, you're very good at performing, but also you love to create as well. So I think, uh, why did I end up releasing Magic? I think I released Magic almost for a little bit of in some way. In I think we I think if you're really prolific with creation, and I'd sort of consulted and advised and came up with ideas for Simon Drake for 10 years, you know, and illusion stuff. I mean, like, you know, all the clever bits and bases and stuff like that and whatever, you know, all the technical drawings and the spec and stuff. I used to do all of that for Simon. And So I think after having done that and then performing, but then having this mass, I used to have books and books of notes and things like that, that just sort of, I guess in a way, releasing it is kind of a way of just putting your little mark on it. It's like just that little, putting a stamp on it and going, that's a variation of something that I came up with. So there is, I guess, a bit of ego, a bit of nostalgia, a bit of wanting to leave a bit of a mark on the industry that you love so much. And so it was mainly that, because to be honest with you, and I know that, for what you make from releasing a download or a DVD or whatever, do 3 or 4 gigs and you've kind of made that money. And it's a lot quicker to do those 3 or 4 gigs than it is to the labor intensive, scripting and making the props and then recording and production and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's a little bit of just gravitas in a way, just kind of maybe creating that sort of like I did that kind of thing. I don't release as much material now. I released something. The last thing I released was called The Gallery, which is a photographic deck, and that was, I would say, when was that? God, about maybe three or 4 years ago now. And I've got plans for other stuff to release because I do love the process as well. I love the process, and I love what people do as well. And I think sometimes as well, if you really have come up with something, not just a variation, but if you've really come up with something unique, and then you give it to other people, it's a little bit, there's something really nice. I still hear from people that I came up with something years ago called Glimpse, which was a little sort of peaky thing. Again, methods and stuff, I won't go too much into it, but and that was back in 2004. And I still hear people just go, yeah, no, use it all the time. I use it for this, I do this, I do this. And you kind of go, wow, and I haven't used it for yonks, you know. But so there's that element to it. I think the creative process is really important, even if you think you're not creative. Because I think that a lot of people go, well, I'm just not creative. And I think everyone is creative. I think everyone has a talent. Everyone has it. But the sad thing is a lot of people don't find out what it is, you know, because of circumstance, and not just within magic. I mean, in life, you know. But I think you should always challenge yourself, and I think there's an honesty, and I'm kind of just like to leave it up to other people to come up with stuff. I think that works better for me, or whatever. So that's good to have that honesty, but it shouldn't stop you from trying. And the way that I kind of like that challenge with Timothy Wenk's incredible creation that we spoke about moments ago, there was a challenge in that. You know, it wasn't that I was going to go out and gig with it. I was young. I wasn't really doing gigs at the time, but I wanted to go through that process of seeing, could I reinvent or reverse engineer this incredible piece of magic? And there was a challenge to that. And sadly, I think we're losing a lot of this. But I remember my aunt used to live in New York. And I remember when I really started to sort of like, I was just in college still, but this magic bug was really still there. And I was really getting into it heavily, like really putting in the study. And I remember my aunt said to me, she goes, oh, there's a shop down in sort of lowerish middle Manhattan called Tannen's Magic. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. And she goes, yeah, she goes, I can pop in there, see if they've got some sort of catalogue or something. She sent me this catalogue from Tannen's, this big fat catalogue, and everything was just an illustration. So it'd be like an illustration of the trick in the key moment, and you know, a paragraph of what this trick was.
Right.
And I loved that, because I'd go, oh my God, that sounds amazing. What could it be? And then you kind of think, what is it? What does it look like in the flesh? There's no trailer to watch. There's nothing that I can try and slow down the YouTube footage and work it out. It didn't exist. And I love that, because you're forced to work it out. And a lot of the time, I remember my aunt, you know, my birthday, she said, I'll just send me a whole list of stuff that you want. And bless her, you know, she's long since passed, and she would send me this box turned up from Tannen's. And a lot of it, you kind of go, not half as good as my version was really good. And I won't use that, but I've kind of got a bit more of an angle as to what I'm going to do with it, you know? So I think creativity, some people are naturally creative. They can just instantly sit down with something and kind of just work out stuff. I was watching one of your other videos and you talk about Jay Sankey. And I think Jay Sankey is, you know, like, he's such a prolific, and I agree with you. I very much agree with you. I think there are absolute genius things that he's created. And then there's a lot of other stuff where you kind of go, it's almost like he just needs to get this stuff out, you know, and there's some absolute, like Airtight with the balloon I just think that's fantastic trick. And why so many magicians, like if you're doing a close-up gig, surely that's a closer for the head table. Just, you know, brilliant piece of magic. So that's the thing with creativity. I think some people are we're not all gonna be as creative as each other. Some are gonna naturally be better performers than others. But I think you should always, it's good to try and be a good performer, or to try and challenge yourself with creativity, because anything that oils, you know, the cogs in our brains is always going to be beneficial. So yeah, so hopefully that's kind of answered your question.
It really has, and it's one of the best answers I've ever heard for that question, which is great. But let me ask you one more thing very quickly on this subject. A lot of magicians, they want to be creative to release their own products, and you've talked about that process. as somebody who had their own production company, as you said at the beginning, in the Minds Productions, and also I think it's very common knowledge that one of your best friends in the world is Peter Nardi of Alakazam, and you released a lot of your magic through Alakazam. What advice would you give somebody who wants to? They've got a product, and they've done everything they need to do. They've worked it in the real world for like 2 or 3 years. They've shown it to other magicians, knowledgeable magicians. Everyone said it's unique. They have it ready. It's not a pipe dream. It's releasable. How should they go out and do this? Should they approach a dealer? Should they try and market it themselves? How did they get onto those dealers' radar?
It's a very very different beast. Self releasing products. When I released a set of DVDs in, again, 2004 with Peter, and it was called The Chapters of Marc Spelmann. So it was these 4 DVDs, and a very skinny Marc Spelmann who looked like he really needed to get some sleep. I needed a good hot meal and a bath back then. But that was, I mean, my God, the investment that Peter put into that. I mean, we had we got guys coming up with professional film crew, like cameras, and hired a room at the International Hotel in Ashford. And I would say that Peter's outgoing for that was in excess. It was over 10,000 to get me in that room with those cameras and get the cameras rolling. And that's before he sold anything. Now, way different. So back in the day, you really had to be on the radar. You had to kind of get your way in with a production company, with people, become notable, lots of lectures, to then be able to release a product, because it would have to be someone like over here, sort of Alakazam, or you've got the God, I'm trying to think of the other guys now. You've got anyway, sort of you've got Theory 11, Illusionist over in the States, and whatever. In my day, you had L&L and A1 Magical Media, A1 Multimedia, I think it was, wasn't it? Early VHS tapes and whatever. But to do that was so expensive to do that you only could do it by becoming in with a production company. That's the only way you could do it. Now, very different. You can go through a magic company, and the benefits through going through a magic company, like, effectively, I could release something now. I do all my own editing. I've got my whole camera set up. This is like my little studio space where I film. I've got green screen capabilities. I've got everything I need here for me to effectively film, edit, and I've got the ideas and everything else from beginning to end, and have a downloadable product. But I told you earlier, I'm the guy, I'm my head in the clouds, just want to make stuff and perform and whatever. So that's where I would say to someone like Peter, Pete, here you go, mate. Just, you've got the database, the people, the whatever, you'll put the hours in, sort of promoting it and whatever. And that works for me in that way. But there's lots of ways. If you want to self sort of publish material, it's so easy. I mean, effectively, with a mobile phone and a lavalier mic plugged into the headphone jack and a little Gorilla Pod tripod, effectively you can record stuff now and edit it and publish it and have it up on Vimeo with a password on it, available to sell to people, to sell them that password. You know what I mean? So it's a weird one. Yeah. So I think it's an open doors. My thing really is not how do you do it, because there's lots of different avenues now. You can go to reputable retailers and wholesalers to release your product, or you can self-publish yourself. My thing is about what is it you're selling, and just make sure it's worthy. Don't don't sell something for the sake of selling something, because there are other ways of making money. Just go and do a couple of gigs. It's much quicker. Sell some of your old tut on eBay. You'll make the same money. So for me, even when I look back at a perfect example, no ego, nothing like that. My DVDs back in 2012, if I watch those DVDs now, I kind of go, there's loads of bits and pieces that I'd go, oh no, take that away, don't that
Oh,
terrible
they're
line.
fantastic, Mark. They are still
No,
amazing.
no. Honestly, no, they are. No, there's a lot of material on there that I'm super proud of. But if I release those now with my well, 16 years or 17 years of experience, superseding that, it would be much tighter, scripting much better, just yeah, themes a lot more direct. The actual mechanics of the tricks are fine, but I think it was an ambitious project, and I am proud of them. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people that love the material on there and have taken the material and done way more with it than I ever did. But I just, yeah, you kind of, I'm not a fan of looking back. Really and truly, the only stuff that I actually don't mind looking back at, I don't mind looking back at Britain's Got Talent. My semi-final in 2018, I don't like watching that because I was so many last minute changes and I felt just, yeah, it wasn't my performance. The audition, the one that everyone has seen about Isabella and Tessa, I'm super proud of that because it's about my little girl and Tessa, so and there was an honesty in my performance where I wasn't Marc Spelmann the mentalist. I'm Mark the dad and the husband who gets a little bit teary at the end and nearly blubbers when it's all said and done. So yeah, so that would be my thing. There's lots of different avenues, and some people want to sell products and self-publish, but just realize that people like Peter and Penguin Magic in the States and whatever, all the different avenues, they have got a database. And if it's about making money and you've got a good product, sometimes that if you want a quick buck, if you're in it for the art and that self-control over what you've created, then maybe self-publishing is a better route to go. But know that it's a lot more of a drip feed process of selling unless you've got a name. And people like, say, for instance, like a D. Christopher, who I know mutual friend of ours. Like D has done both avenues. He's released stuff through Penguin and and that kind of thing, and I think a bit through Illusionist as well. But he also self-publishes, and he's got his own little company now that he's kicked off. But that's taken a lot of work for D. You kind of, some things you kind of go, let's mass sell this, and then there's other stuff where you kind of go, actually, I'm gonna self-release this one because it's a bit more of a baby or something like that. So there's different avenues, but I just think as long as you've got something that's quality, then it just depends. Can you be bothered with posting it out and sending it, or do you want someone to do that for you?
Yeah, that's great advice. Now we need to move on to Britain's Got Talent, which I know everybody who's watching this is going to want to hear about. What's interesting, and let's forget about X for a minute. Let's go back in time to when Marc Spelmann was entering Britain's Got Talent. Now, these days, Magic and Britain's Got Talent are a match made in heaven. Like, I think in the last series, there were like half the acts were magicians. But when you went on as Marc Spelmann, there was still that kind of feeling that the judges didn't really like magic. And so I suppose my question is, why did you take the risk of going on Britain's Got Talent? Because it's not like you're looking for your big break. You were super successful, working literally all over the world. Everybody knows your name, both within magic and also you are the go-to guy when people want to book a corporate mentalist or whatever. It's not like you needed that step up on the ladder, but then you appear on Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah.
So why did you take that risk? Because it is a risk.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think, listen, going on any television program at any point is a bit of a risk. I mean, yeah, so doing any sort of television that is going to ultimately be broadcast, whether it was a friendly chat show, if your trick doesn't work or it doesn't kind of go over well, then it's going to be seen by a lot of people. So, no, in fairness, I think, I mean, obviously, a mutual friend, David Penn, went on BGT and was one of the first magicians really to get a decent response. And then you had James Moore. And then you also had Jamie Raven as well, and Darcy Oak. So they all superseded me. So they all came before me. So if anything, I think those guys, and obviously Russ Stevens being the sort of main magical consultant on the show, they've kind of padded the ground. So really, when I went on in 2018, you'd already had Richard Jones win. He won in 2016. So they've now got a winner. So they know that Magic 100% is a viable. You had Jamie Raven came second in 2015. So you kind of, it was much safer doing it when I went as opposed to when, say, like David Penn went on it. It was way different times. There was a friendlier vibe when I went on, and that is because of people like Jamie and David and James Moore and Darcy. So yeah, I would say it was a bit safer for me to do it. The reason why I did it was, as I've had a really great career, and I've had really good fun doing magic and mentalism, but I've never reached that top, what I would call top tier. And you're very lovely with your words and what you say, but I would always say that someone like a really good friend of mine, Marc Paul. For me, Marc Paul is like, the corporate mind reader, like really is out there doing it, and on the cruise ships as well and stuff. And so I would always say that Mark and Graham Jolly were always above me in terms of maybe the fees that they could get, some of the gigs that they would get, and that kind of thing. So, as I had a good career, 100%. I was making a living doing magic, without question, and I could pay my bills and live a comfortable life. But I remember in 2015, Jamie Raven, actually, the actual whole story is in 2014, there was a real dip in work in London. And I remember I had an April, I didn't have a single gig in April. And one of the agents that I'm with got in contact with me and they said, Mark, I've got a gig over in Portugal. It's not for very much money. They haven't got a big budget, but it's half an hour of close-up magic drinks reception in Portugal. Would you consider it? I went, what's the fee? Told me the fee, and I was like, and I'm looking at the diary in April, and there's nothing now. And I'm thinking to myself, let's just go and pay the bills, shall we? So I went, yeah, okay. So I did it. Turn up at the airport, get a text message, Jamie Raven, Mark, we're on the gig together. So we both went, got a beer, having a chat, and I went to him, are you, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to ask you how much money you're earning, but it's not a big budget on this one. He went to me, well, I'm doing it for this much. And I was like, yeah, same. Right, yeah. And he goes, I'm doing it because it was quiet. It's quiet. The whole month is quiet. And what you're going to do, sit at home with your ego or go out and earn a bit of money to pay the bills? Because, your ego doesn't pay the mortgage. Money does. So we were both over in Portugal. Now, fast forward. So that's 2014. Fast forward. BGT 2015. Jamie Raven comes second on the show, and he's now like, because I was good friends with Russ, so like Russ is with Jamie, and they're jetting off and doing these gigs over in Saudi Arabia and this, that, and the other for really decent fees. And I'm sort of thinking, wow, so he's really, that sort of cheap gig in Portugal days have kind of gone now for him. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm not getting any younger. I mean, Jamie's like 10 years younger than me. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not getting any younger. It's a lot friendlier doing BGT now because of, David and Jamie and, all the people I mentioned earlier. So I should just go for it. I should just put my concerns about no's and failure. And, I've told you earlier, I was always the one that would avoid the negatives or the no's. Put that to one side and just go for it. So I thought, that's it. And then, and I was going to do it in 2016, which is the year that Richard Jones won it. So all planning to do it, even sent Russ an email. Russ, I'm thinking about doing it, doing mind reading, whatever. And it was like, Russ was like, yeah, just let me know what you're planning on doing. And I can kind of just, put it out there that Marc Spelmann might be doing it. So anyways, that was that. And then, it's well documented. My wife, we've been trying for a kid for a long time, a baby, and just nothing was working. We've been doing IVF for 5 years. Tessa became pregnant, but then literally a month and a half, 2 months later, she was diagnosed with a really aggressive form of breast cancer. So it just, any notion of doing Britain's Got Talent, even going out and doing gigs, now just became like my whole life was like, my wife's pregnant, cancer? Does she survive? Does baby survive? Do either of them survive? What's going on? You know, so it literally is like someone pulling the rug from underneath your feet and saying, right, deal with that. And I just became protective. I had a bit of money in the bank, so I was okay. I phoned up all my agents, all the event organizers and bookers and stuff, and I just said, look, I'm going to have to take myself off the radar for a while. Got to look after my wife. You know, she's pregnant. Got to get through this pregnancy. She's got to have all of her cancer treatments, and just see what life is going to be like on the other side of this. So that was it. I didn't, you know, the whole idea of Britain's Got Talent, everything else just was, forget all of that. And then that was it. And then I just sort of took myself out. I did a couple of gigs here and there where I felt that like Tessa would have enough support here. I mean, she went through like, I mean, absolute warrior. I mean, like just everything you could think about, like chemotherapy, losing the hair, mastectomies, all this kind of stuff. Every war wound you could have with fighting cancer, Tessa went through while she was pregnant. And then even after she had given birth to Isabella, then had to go in for even harder forms or more aggressive forms of chemotherapy and radiotherapy as well, because now Isabella was out. So Tessa could have even more invasive kind of forms of cancer treatment that she couldn't have whilst pregnant. So anyway, so that was it. So I think it was like literally a 2-year period that I barely performed. I was a dad, you know, a husband, a dad, you know, protective, you know, fight or flight mode. I was fighting it with Tessa as best I could and just doing all the things I needed to do. And then that was the change. I remember sort of Tessa saying to me about like, Marc, when are you gonna go back to work? What's gonna happen? You know, I'm all right. I'm in a much better place now. And I remember just thinking to myself, God, it was coming up to sort of like, I think it was sort of like September time. And I always remembered that like to do BGT, you kind of start talking around that August, September time. Even though the auditions are in January, you need to be well prepared and ahead of the game. So I remember just sort of thinking to myself, you know, I'm going to do Britain's Got Talent, but I just had a different message. It was a different thing. It wasn't Marc, the mind reader, you know, sort of giving it the whole mentalism stuff. It was much more about, is magic real? Does it exist? If it does, what is it? And you know, being a magician, and you know this as well, you know, you go out and you perform magic and you get that question or you get that sort of statement that people say, yeah, well, very clever, but obviously magic isn't real. And I really started to analyze what is magic. And when Isabella was born, and I think, you know, as a father, you'll feel the same. And that is that when you see your child for the first time, it's like the connection. It's one of the most magical moments ever. It's, you know, but a much deeper, organic form of magic. And even like through Tessa fighting cancer and stuff, you're dealing with life and death. And I know that, you know, you said that you lost your parents quite close to each other, wasn't it? Was that a while ago? And
literally, yeah. And both my parents, they'd always wanted me to have a child, and they both died before Rylan was born.
Right.
Luckily, they both died very soon together, so they knew that Sarah was pregnant.
Sure.
They knew that there was going to be a child, but they didn't make it, unfortunately. So
yeah, I see. Now for me, I'd never really gone through anything. I mean, I'd lost my godfather who I was really close to as a kid, but you know, like directly, like my parents were both alive and everything else and whatever. So I'd never really gone through anything like that, the immediate close up, like, you know, on a daily basis, change in my life as to when Tessa was going through what she was going through. And I think it can change you as a human being. And I think I'm a much nicer human being. Not that I was a bad human being before, but I think I think my mindset is very different about life and just, you know, my ambitions and what I want to do in life are far different now after that than before. So before that, and before Tessa going through that, I would have been the guy that would have been really envious of Dynamo having the success that he's had. So I'd be like, well, I should have that because I'm good and I can do this and I can do that, and that should be me. And I'd have that, not horribly, but there'd be a bit of that in me. And then now on the other side of it, I just realised that life is just it doesn't work out. It's not a mathematical formula. You know, you can't count. You might be the best pianist in the world, but you might never play a piano. You might not never know that you were good at playing a piano. So for me now, life changed really massively, and I do believe that magic exists, and I don't mean in some weird hippie spiritual way, but I do believe that there is a thing called magic. And for me, magic isn't a physical thing. It's not something you can touch or whatever, and it's much more organic. For me, magic is a feeling. And I think when we perform as magicians, we theatrically induce that moment of wonder. Like I said to you at the very beginning, the moment of wonder and astonishment for a brief moment in time. We pull that rug from underneath the person's feet and force them into this sort of like theatrical induced state of wonder. But I think that state of wonder exists in real life. The moment you held your child for the first time, looking at your parents, or remembering, you know, moments with your family, or key things in your life. You know, sometimes we wake up in the morning and the day just feels good. There's no reason for it, but you wake up and for just a bit of an extra spring in your step, and everything feels all right in the world. And I think that's a very small moment of magic. This is just a feeling that we have. So and that was it. And I really sort of started thinking, you know, magic does exist. It really does. But you know, for me, whether magic exists or not is dependent upon what you define magic as. So if you think, does magic exist? My definition of magic is you finding my card magically, then no, sorry to break it to you, but real magic doesn't exist. There's ways that we can make it look that way, but if you're but for me, magic isn't in that at all. Magic is in moments, in people, in those we love, the memories that we create, and that's where magic really exists. So that's what I wanted to do. So if you watch that performance, you'll see that I come out on stage, I do this whole rigmarole of stuff, you know, like take a crayon, take a card, a character card, mix this Rubik's Cube, Simon's circle a word in a book. And then I walk up onto stage and I say, now, if I told you I knew that outcome yesterday, a week ago, or a month ago, some people would say that would have to be magic. But it's not magic. It's clever, it's interesting, it's intriguing. Some might even say it's amazing, but it's not real magic. For me, real magic happened 2 years ago. This for me, I even remember the lines. This for me is real magic. And then I press the button. And it's all about Isabella. And that was what the whole thing was about. Forget the silly trick. Forget the trick. The whole message is that is real magic. That is real magic. So that's why I did it. I felt, and I remember doing it. I had no idea how it was going to be perceived. Because I deliberately went on not being magic looking. I kind of just wore my everyday clothes. I didn't have the waistcoat, the tattoos out, and you know, all that kind of stuff, and like ready for performance mode. I just sort of went out just in a pair of jeans and a jumper that I'd wear at home. And I didn't know how it was going to be. And I mean this with all honesty. I remember Tessa just sort of saying to me, like, listen, if you get buzzed or they don't like it or whatever, Mark, don't get angry, because I used to wear my heart on my sleeve a lot. And I was like, no, I won't. I'm fine. I said, listen, at the end of the day, if worst case scenario, I walk out onto the London Palladium stage, I do my dedication to Isabella, and it never even gets screened, because I knew at the time, you know, you don't always get screened. They've got a lot of stuff to get through. And, you know, whether or not you end up on the TV is, you know, you kind of don't even know. And I said to Tess, if the worst case scenario is that I just end up saying to Isabella when she was older, you know, your dad, I went on stage and played in really famous theatre, and I did a dedication, and it was all to you. And your mum will tell you about it. You know, in my mind, that was an absolute possibility that might be all that day might be. And then obviously, completely the opposite, golden buzzers. And
I mean, to me, that was the best audition that I've ever seen a magician do on BGT.
Oh, thank you.
So many different reasons, and it hasn't been beaten since. It was absolutely amazing. And my wife, who's quite hard at times, was teared up during the whole thing, and almost blubbering at the end. That was a genuine reaction, you know, that it was an incredible, for you to think that there wasn't any possible outcome other than every single person loving it just amazes me, because
But
it
you
is.
know, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because it is such a personal subject. You know, it's massive. You know, it's massively personal. You're effectively doing a magic trick and kind of almost poo-pooing the magic trick and saying, "My wife has fought cancer and my baby's here, and they both managed to survive, and that's real magic." And I thought to myself, you know, maybe it's that sort of slightly protective side of me, if you like, was thinking they might turn around and think, you know, I think it was in bad taste. You know, like, I understand the dedication, or I don't understand why you had to do the magic trick, or I don't know. You sort of think, could it be perceived in that way? Possibly. You know, people might see it as a negative, and you know, listen, you know, like, you know, and I know social media and stuff like that. I mean, I've had people. There's been some real, like, I mean, thankfully 98%, 99% of everything I've ever heard or read or whatever about my performance has been really positive. But my goodness, you read some really, really nasty stuff from people, you sort of think, wow, you must be in a pretty bad place to write that, you know. So I've read some of the bad stuff as well, and even within the magic community, there was a magician who I won't name, but he wrote about my performance really, really derogatory, and said that he felt that it was in really bad taste, that I sort of stooped to an all-time low in using a personal story that and that didn't justify, you know, I wasn't justified in telling the story or whatever, and found it really distasteful that I used a challenging time in life and formed some sort of a performance around it. And for me, I've been really lucky. I mean, I've performed for Eric Clapton twice, and really lovely, really shy, but lovely man, and obviously an absolute legend on the guitar, right? And I remember he wrote a song called "Tears in Heaven." And Tears in Heaven is a beautiful song, and it's about his son. So he had an apartment in New York, and his son crawled out, really tragic, crawled out of this window and fell to his death, a little toddler. And so then Eric Clapton wrote this song called Tears in Heaven, which is effectively about his deceased son. It's a beautiful song. And I think to myself, that's where sometimes magic fails to move with other art forms. And I do believe magic is an art form. I believe you can tell a story with magic, you can convey feelings with magic, and you can fill a room with wonder and awe, and lift a room with magic, you know. So for me, whether that's music, a painting, a piece of opera, or whatever, all of these things. So I very much put magic amongst those mediums, and call it an art form. And I think to myself, surely, I mean, if you're going to criticize a magician for using a personal element or story in a piece of magic, um, then doesn't that same judgment fall upon everything? Oh, you shouldn't tell that story in a film. You shouldn't tell that story in a book. You shouldn't tell that story in a song, you know, whatever. And I think that's so for me, I felt really justified in the performance. And I think anybody that found it, um, you know, sort of kind of maybe if they found a negative to it, I think that's a bit short-sighted. I think we've all got stories to tell. Every one of us has got a story to tell. Some are really tragic, some are really hard. Some people have come from really hard upbringings and things like that. Everyone has got a story to tell. And everyone has got the right to tell their story, however they want to tell it. Um, so for me, that was my moment to tell the story. So I wasn't, and the other interesting fact about that is that, you know, when you see Britain's Got Talent, I had genuinely no idea that I was going to get that golden buzzer. And that sounds like a weird one, because a lot of people have said, well, it's a golden buzzer moment, you know, da da da, hat, you know, when Isabella said the word hat, it's like a whoa moment. When we turned up at the London Palladium that day, we walked in, and I remember the adrenaline's going. I mean, I'm pretty good with nerves and stuff like that, but this is a little bit different. You know, you're in the London Palladium, you're pulled left, right, and centre. You got to do a bit of social media, do a bit of this. They want to interview you there, and all you want to do is get in your zone for your performance and do the best that you can do. But I remember walking with one of the sort of like the assistants. They're walking me along. They've got headphones on and the headset and the folder and stuff. And they went, "So what are you doing for us?" I went, I'm doing a piece of magic." And they were like, "Brilliant. Okay, so how do you feel about possibly getting the golden buzzer?" And I was like, "Oh my god, right? Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, God, yeah. Has anybody got a golden buzzer yet?" And they went, "Yeah, yeah, all 4 golden buzzers. The judges have done all their golden buzzers." And I was like, "So there are no golden buzzers then?" And I totally forgot that Ant and Decker got a golden buzzer. So then they said, "No, Ant and Decker got a golden buzzer." And then I remember I said, "Oh, who knows?" And then they walked off. And then I turned to Tessa and I said to Tessa, and like, goes on in truth, I don't need to fabricate a story. I went, "There's no way that I'll get a golden buzzer. I mean, even if it goes well, there's no way that I'll get a golden buzzer because last year, Ant and Dec gave their golden buzzer to a magician called Matt Edwards, who was a comedy magician, like a Lee Evans kind of really lovely guy. He did the salt pour and did it to this song, Tequila, and it was like a really funny moment. And they gave him the golden buzzer. So I said to Tessa, that Ant and Dec that year, 2017, gave the golden buzzer to a magician. There's no way that they're going to give a golden buzzer to another magician. So when I walked out and I did that performance, even standing on that stage at the end, I had no inclination that Ant and Dec were going to run out. And that's why when they do run out, I'm kind of looking at them going, "What is going on?" And that's why Tessa's in the audience and just puts her hand on her head and goes, "Oh my God." Because it was just like, we were so adamant that this, no way was this going to happen. And then it did. But then obviously the way that they show it, they show things out of sequence. So they kind of they go, "Oh, they put that one in show 1, that'll go in show 3 or whatever." So I ended up being, the person who got the first golden buzzer, but really I was the person who got the last golden buzzer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you did remarkably well in that run. That was in 2018, wasn't it? I mean, you did incredibly well. Like you say, you got the golden buzzer. You did really well in each round. You did get to the final.
No, I got to the semi-final.
Yeah.
And my semi-final, that's the one, I find that difficult to watch. Like there's so many bits that I'm not, the flow of the routine is very different. If you watch my audition, I just knew what I was doing. I just going up to David and everything else. And even like Alicia even kind of sort of tested me. If you look, she chooses the very last card. And what you don't see is I had thumbed all the way through a whole deck of cards for Alicia to then just point to the very last card. But they cut all that in the edit to just speed things up because it's all about time. But like, I felt, and if you hear, as I walk over to David Walliams, I go, "David," and you hear David Walliams go, he just hums. And it's almost in a slightly disapproving way. And I don't think they realise, one of the things that David Walliams said that you don't see on the audition in the feedback afterwards is he said, you knew when you walked out on that stage, you knew how good you was going to be, but you never ever conveyed that in any way to us, so that at the end we're all just going, "Where did that come from? That was amazing." And that wasn't the plan. I just came out as Marc and just, done a few gigs and I do magic, and I've just been on 2-year layoff, and you didn't even hear that in the interview, where they sort of said, sort of his magic, and I sort of said, "Well, yeah, I do magic. I've done a few jobs, and then I actually said, I've just come off of a 2-year layoff." And the reason why they cut that out of the end edit is they want that whole end bit to be a surprise. Oh my God. So they didn't want to supersede that with me kind of giving any hints. Because I even had the interview with me with Ant and Dec before I walk out on stage. They interview, every act. Ant and Dec go, "Okay, so what are you doing?" And they came up to me in the wings before I walked out, and they said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm a magician. I'm going to be doing magic, but not magic." And they went, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, at the end of my performance, I'm going to show you real magic." And they were like, "Oh, we love magic. We love all that." And I went, No. At the end of my performance, I'm going to show you real magic, like real magic." And they were both like, "Oh, wow, okay." But then they took all of that out because they didn't want the audience at home, the TV viewers, to watch it and kind of go, something's coming at the end. And I naively didn't even think in that way of TV. I'm just kind of going, at the end of it, there's a big thing. I'm going to show you real magic at the end, and that's what I meant, kind of thing. So yeah, but in my semi-final, I didn't hit the mark. I deservedly, I went out in the semi-finals. There were two acts that were better than me that went through, and rightly so. I just wasn't as strong, and there was a lot of chopping and changing at the last minute of my performance, and a bit of that was me, a bit of it was the production, and it's never malicious. Like I think the production and the producers of BGT sometimes get a bit of a bad rap, especially now. And really and truly, if they could have the whole show with really good acts, they would have a whole show with really good acts.
Yeah.
Because when I did America's Got Talent, the Champions, and I ended up coming out of that in the semi-finals of the Champions in America, and I ended up sitting with Simon in his dressing room for about sort of like half an hour, just me and Simon just talking about the whole experience of Magician X, me on there in 2018 and everything else. And Simon said to me, he goes, "How are you doing? Has it made a difference?" I was like, "Has it made a difference? I'm in LA performing on America's Got Talent, the Champions. I've just done a performance with Terry Crews, and I've flown back from Japan. I've been on German television. I've done this. Of course, it's made a difference." And Simon said, he goes, "That's all I ever want." He goes, whether you win the show or not, for me, it's always been a way of going, how can we get these people that might not get that break or get that moment? How can we get them out there? So it's, yeah. So they really wanted me to be in the final in 2018. And I think there was a bit of panic about, maybe that's a bit too long, Marc. Maybe Marc could change that. And then Russ would say to me, Marc, they were thinking that bit might be a bit too long. Can you change it a bit? And I'd go, yeah. And it was literally 24 hours before. So when I came out and performed it, it didn't feel like I'd worn the shoes long enough. It was, so that's where I and rightfully so, I deserve to not make it through. So yeah.
But you told me that your reason for going on the show was you wanted to recatapult your career. You'd been on a 2-year layoff. You didn't want to be doing the cheap gigs in Portugal. You wanted to be. You've just come out of 2018. You're a golden buzzer act. However you feel you did in the semi-final, you did not disgrace yourself. Everybody talked about how good it was. That must have had the desired effects. So why did you then decide to?
Well, no, see, because here's the truth, okay? So, this is anyone that's stuck watching this interview for as long as they have. I honestly, I don't know how you've done it. Right?
Listen, I'm telling you right now, by the way, and I've made a career for myself being completely honest. This is the best interview I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you, mate.
And the longest interview we've done up until this point is Sean Farquhar. I think you can't shut that guy up. I think we're close to beating him, and I'm just like on the edge of my seat. This is just amazing.
Okay. So when I came out of 2018 in the semi-finals, it had a bit of a reverse effect. It was a bit of a weird one. And the reason why it was odd is because when you do something like BGT, you then, a lot of the time, you'll get management or you'll get people that are interested in managing you. And you now get this sort of perceived value of your performances. So you're not doing the Portugal gigs for, money to pay the phone bill that month or whatever. You're doing gigs that are paying more than that. The downside with me not being the mentalist Marc Spelmann and being very much the dad Marc Spelmann is I think a lot of people saw my performance and went, "Did you see that dad do that lovely dedication to his wife and daughter?" And not really get a vibe that this was my full-time occupation. And for that reason, I wasn't flooded with offers of work because I don't know that everyone thought that I did it full-time. And this realization only came about via two things. One, I've now had an agent, a management that were looking after me. but the work wasn't. There wasn't like an influx of like, like the day after that it's aired or anything like that. That like, can we get Marc Spelmann to do this, that, and the other? But also, after my audition aired, Isabella was 2 years old at this point, and we took her to Peppa Pig World for the first time. And I couldn't move in Peppa Pig World after that audition. So you can imagine all parents, all probably sat down watching BGT. I couldn't move. So everywhere I went, literally, oh my God, you're the guy that was on Britain's Got Talent. And it was lovely. Loads of parents and reiterating some of their stories. And you're kind of going, wow, there's a lot of people that have gone through similar stuff to what we've gone through. But they were saying, do you think you'd do the magic? And I remember about 4 or 5 people saying that. And then I said to Tessa, these people don't think that I do magic full time or whatever it was. So it was a really weird dynamic. So I didn't have, and the weird thing is, I couldn't really work through the agents that I'd formed all the relationships with, because these agents, they have a bracket of client that they work for. And if you're going to be going out for bigger money, you very rarely work for the same agents. Those agents will have that same tier platform of our magicians are 3, 4, 500 quid, whatever, that's our price bracket for magicians. If you're 2 grand, 3 grand, 4 grand, or whatever it is you're charging, you're not really going to be listed with those agents, because you know what I mean? It's like you're not going to, it's just a different tier of agent, if you like. So now I've got management, but I couldn't rely on those bread and butter gigs. But so I'm effectively sitting around almost waiting and sort of kind of like, are other gigs going to come in? Are we going to, how is this going to work, kind of thing? And I think it was about 2 months after the show that I got a first paying good gig, which was for a property developer just up in Hertfordshire. And they had booked me to do mix and mingle at the launch of these beautiful homes that they had just put together, and had an open day. And I was there just doing mix and mingle, but it was a well paid close-up gig. But that was the first one. So so it didn't really sort of, my career didn't skyrocket because of BGT. My popularity did, in terms of walking around and people going, oh my God, you're the guy, you're the guy, you're the guy. But people putting their hands in their pockets going, let's book that guy. I don't think they, like someone like Colin McLeod on AGT comes out and does the mind reading, oh, this guy he does that all the time. We should book him for our corporate event. And Darcy Oak coming out on BGT and doing the doves and stuff. You're not thinking of him as being a dad. You're just thinking of Darcy Oak doing this amazing dove act, and let's get him booked. Whereas for me, because it was such a personal story, I think a lot of people just sort of thought he's a dad that has done a little bit of magic as a dedication, as opposed to this is a full-time professional magician who has done a dedication, if that makes sense. So going back as X, there were 2 reasons for going back as X. I've kind of almost asked myself that question. Is that a question you were going to ask?
Yeah, kind of what yes, basically.
Yeah.
Why did you go back?
Sorry, so I've kind of just taken over completely there.
No, that's good. Yeah. You're a mind reader. I expected you to know what it was.
Yeah. The reason for going back as X, there was a couple of reasons. One reason was because the biggest reason was because all the way through my performance, in Isabella's cot, for people that have seen it, there is a picture of John Lennon, and in the semi-final, John Lennon is the image on the big canvas thing that I put together, and the word hope is in Isabella's cot, and that's all there as an Easter egg for me to get through to the final if I make it, and then I will do a performance. My final performance was going to end up with Amanda Holden thinking of any word, and it was going to be the word hope. And I was going to give a little bit of a speech at the end, not long, but just about, real magic lies in hope. And we must always have hope. We must, whatever. And it was going to be this nice moment to end off the performance. And that was going to be my 3-phase performances on Britain's Got Talent circa 2018. Didn't make the final. And I came back, and it was really frustrating, because it's like you starting a brilliant trick off, and going, that started off well, flummoxed a little bit, floundered in the middle a little bit, but the ending would have been really good, but never got to do it.
Yeah.
So part of me was thinking, I want to finish this performance. It's all about hope. That's what it's about, this whole thing. You know, we didn't have anything but hope when Tessa was going through what she was going through. And so I thought, I really want to go back. But then I thought to myself, it was weird in a way, because I remember sort of thinking, I mentioned it to Russ. I spoke to Russ and I said, could you, is there a way of going back? And Russ was going, once you've done it and you kind of hit the level that you've done, they wouldn't have you back, because you probably, it's not going to be able to emulate what you've done. It's kind of like you're always going to be, it might just be like, oh, he was so good the year before, you know, it's a shame he didn't leave it at that, if that makes sense. So I just sort of put it to one side, and that was it. I just thought, you know, I can't do it. And in 2011, I'd created this. I always write in TV ideas for shows and stuff, and I wrote this idea for a TV show called Prank, and it was this faceless, anonymous magician, almost like a Banksy does magic kind of thing. And I was sitting in this very office space, and going through just all my old, I was having to clear out, and I found this picture of the pitch that I'd done, because my background in graphic design, I'd taken a photograph and done a proper pitch document. You know, when you're pitching for television shows, you kind of put a good old pitch document together, all the graphics and everything else. And on the front of it it just said prank, in big sort of spooky lettering. And I'd taken a picture of myself just with a tracksuit on, a hoodie, but with a white mask on. And I thought, hang on a minute. If I went back and no one knew it was me, that would be interesting, because now it's not even about me being the guy that was on it last year, because no one knows who it is. So you've already eradicated that problem. And then also as well, you get judged on these talent shows. I mean, it happens. You put anything out in the public, you get judged, right? And one of the judgments that really bugged me was people would say, oh, he only got the golden buzzer because his wife had cancer. And you go, well, no, if I'd have walked out on, if that's your theory, then really I should have walked out and with no magic gone, hi, my name is Marc Spelmann and my wife has got cancer and she's struggled to have a baby. And then Ant and Dec would come running out and hit a golden buzzer. That clearly is not going to happen. The reason why Ant and Dec came out and hit the golden buzzer is because of an accumulation of the story, perseverance, the magic, how I relayed the story, all of those things got to a point of golden buzzer. Of course, the story has an element to it. It's a fundamental part of the trick. So of course it has some bearing on it, but just to say someone gets through because of a sob story, well then effectively, well, can they just not have any song or magic trick or whatever and just walk out and go, Minan just died. Any chance of going through to the semi-finals? You know, it's just not going to work. It doesn't work like that. And I think people are very simplistic in that thought process. But what I really loved when I came up with this idea with Prank and kind of was contemplating, I thought, oh, hang on a minute, now I'm going to challenge that consensus completely, because now I can go back on Britain's Got Talent and have no story at all. No background, no history. You don't even know if I'm a man or a woman. You've got no idea. And the female voice came about because I showed Tessa this image of me with this old from 2011 with this hoodie on. And I went, Tessa, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do it again. And Tessa was like, oh, bless him. He's having a breakdown. And and I went, no, I'm going to do it. She said, Marc, you can't, darling. You know, you mentioned it to Russ, and Russ said it'd be highly unlikely, and you know, there's really no way that you could do it. And I said, no, but if they don't know it's me, and I showed her the picture of Prank, and then she went, oh, Marc, how are you going to go on Britain's Got Talent dressed as a hooded, mask-wearing thing and get any connection with the audience? And I said, I'm going to do it because of what I say. by what I stand for, not by my backstory, not because of this, but about us as human beings, and we are one and connected and whatever. And then she said, they're going to recognize your voice. And I was like, oh, yeah, good point. Of course they will. We've just been on the bloody show. Came back into the office, recorded a bit of audio into the mic, put it through sort of a couple of apps that you got on the computer to sort of distort it. And it sounded horrific. I sounded like Beelzebub. And now pair that up with a hood and a white mask. It's like I'd just scare the pants. They wouldn't even put me on the show because I'd be scaring the kids. So then I thought to myself, hang on a minute. Oh, God, I've got to think of another way then. And then we've got a really good friend of ours, is a lady called Melanie, who would always come round. She works with Tessa. And on every Wednesday night, she comes round and just stays over. And I just went, hang on, Mel, can you do me a favour? Just say this line of text into this mic. I had no idea what it was for. And she's sort of reading it. Okay, we are connected and da-da-da-da-da, whatever. And okay, brilliant, thanks. Came back into the studio space, put it into the computer, had my image, and I had this, I'm looking at this prank thing. I've distorted her voice and I'm listening to her voice and I'm going, perfect, works. Because it's far less scary, because even though it's distorted, but you can tell it's a female voice. So now it does a number of things. One, it gets over the hurdle of people who recognize my voice. And two, it softens the odd image of X. I mean, bit of an odd look, right? You know what I mean? But now give that a female voice. And the psychology behind it is, think of like whatever scares you most, right? Like some sort of demon at the end of the bed. And now make it have a female voice. Immediately it loses an element of that threatening vibe to it, because female voices are inherently, trusting and whatever, so that was it. And the only downside to it was I realized that everything was going to have to be pre-recorded. So my performance had to be absolutely on point, because I am now relying on a really good friend of mine, Colin, to cue the sound people to play my audio for my audition. So every element of that audition, when I do the PK touches with Ant and Dec, is all pre-recorded. And my friend Colin, who's a magician friend, is over by the sound desk going, right, pause it, play, pause it, play, and literally doing that to my actions. And when I was on the show as X, I never spoke. Like, I never ever spoke. I was a nightmare on that show for the poor producers, because when you do Britain's Got Talent, they want you to do all these interviews. Can we get him on Facebook? And like when I was Marc Spelmann the year before, it was like, can we get you doing an interview for our Instagram? Can we get you, Tessa and Isabella, just kind of walking down the corridor before you come into the audition? Can we this? Can we that? Can you tell us what it would mean to you if you got through to the semi-finals? What would you do if you won? And they want all this content because it's a show, but also social media is massive. I was a nightmare as X, because they would say to Colin, who was pretending to be my manager throughout the whole experience, they'd say, is there any chance that we could do some sort of Instagram thing with X? And then Colin would come over to me, say it in my ear, and I'd look and just go, but I was in the mask the whole time.
So how many people knew about this?
So when I went for the very first,
you weren't looking at this from the magic community, but when you were through the whole run of the show, it was like one giant Guess Who game in the UK magic community.
Yeah, and some of them got it right. Nick Einhorn sent me a message saying, Marc, I've worked with you far too many times. I know you in a suit. That's you.
But nobody knew for sure. I mean, Nick obviously knows you, but like I had people saying to me, it's David Penn, it's Michael Vincent. Like there's so many different people.
Michael's about a foot taller than me. I don't know how it would be.
It was like the biggest Guess Who game. And it was so fun every week, everybody be guessing. How did many people know about this?
No, so basically the way that it worked out, the very first person that knew was Tessa. And then after Tessa, it was when I realized the complications of trying to pull this off, my friend Colin. So got in contact with Colin. He's, as I say, he's a really, really good friend of mine, but we are very known for hanging around with each other at Blackpool and that kind of thing. So So as soon as I said to him, look, you know, do you fancy going on a bit of a journey? And I phoned him up. I said, I've got this harebrained idea. I don't know if it's going to work. We're going to have to see how it's going to work out and stuff. But do you fancy it? And he was like, what do I need to do? And I was like, right, you need to pretend to be my manager. You need to be my personal assistant. You need to speak for me at every single step of the way. Doing Britain's Got Talent, sent him a JPEG image of prank. I'm doing it like this. I will never speak to anybody. Everything's pre-recorded. And he was like, yep, count me in. So then Colin knew. Then Melanie, at that point, Melanie had only recorded unknowingly a test sample of this speech. Once I realized that I was going to need her to be very specific and kind of just chop and change some of the dialogue at a moment's notice, I just said to her, look, you know, sworn to secrecy. So Melanie knew, Tessa knew, and Colin knew, and then my mum knew. So that was the first initial group of people that knew, and that was it. And then afterwards, Peter knew, and then Russ didn't know until I was in Manchester at the Lowry Theatre on the stage, dressed as X for a run through, a test run through, so they could get the lights and the cameras in the right position. At that point, Russ Stevens found out and was perplexed, like, oh my god, you mentioned, like, he found out very quickly once I was on stage, because he knows me, and you know, it was like I had to speak to Colin, had to speak to Russ about some of my technical requirements, because Russ is the guy on BGT in terms of magic. But then Russ knows Colin really well. So it was always going to happen. Like, whereas I could get away with it with everyone else. So there was a few things that we did. So, you know, we didn't stay in a hotel. I deliberately auditioned in Manchester because I know how many magicians go for the show. You know, we only see the ones that get screened, but there'll be another 10 other magicians that have gone to the Palladium on this day, that day, and whatever to audition. So I didn't want to audition in London. I thought I need to be away from London, so we'll do it up in Manchester. The way that I ended up applying is because Spelmann is a stage name. It's not my real surname. So I applied for the show again under my real name. So no one's going to know my real name. They're not going to remember my real name. I'm forever known as Marc Spelmann, the magician. So that's how we got on the show, and I got to go to Manchester. We stayed in an apartment. You didn't stay in a hotel, because if you stay in any hotel anywhere near where they're auditioning, you're going to be BGT auditionees everywhere. So I hired an apartment. It's actually Tessa that said to me, get like an Airbnb, and we got an Airbnb in Manchester, a stone's throw away. The morning of the audition, I got dressed up as X. Everything, all the chairs and the bits and bobs packed away in a case. Colin put a wig on, a pair of glasses. I've got all this is going to go on my YouTube channel. I've got loads of footage of this. And then we drove to the Lowry via an Uber. Imagine the poor guy in the Uber is at the bottom of this apartment block. You know, and then this guy just comes down, and then his X, you know, walking over to the car. And then Colin just turned around and just said to him, BGT? And he was like, oh, okay, right. And that was it. We went into the Lowry Theatre. I'm dressed as X. I've got all my paperwork and everything else. Even the audition that I was doing, and I've got the test footage for this, because my routine obviously utilised Ant and Dec, as people will know. And the way that I did this was, it was so difficult. I couldn't just get two people to come and sit in chairs and for me to go, this is the act that I'm going to be doing on the show. So I sent them a pitch document. So this, and my illustration skills came in. I did a storyboard of the whole thing. And then they came back all via email and everything else. I had a different mobile phone number, everything. It's crazy, right? But they came back with, we need to see the act. We can't just go by storyboard. It's brilliant, but we need to see the act. So I did a video, and I've got this video. It's split 3 ways. X in the middle, fully dressed up. Ant on this side, Dec on this, Dec on this side and on this side. But the way that I did it was, I put a black mask on, so a whole sort of balaclava black mask completely over the eyes, like a morph mask, I think they call it, where it covers the eyes and the nose and everything. and I just had a capital A for ant and a capital D for deck, and it was a three-way split screen. Like you just sort of crop it in Premiere Pro or After Effects or whatever, and it was literally the voice. I did the voiceover and everything else, and it was literally all the touches and the hands go. If you think about what ant and deck actually do in that whole routine, effectively a lot of it is their eyes closed doing a bit of this and then holding up fingers and stuff, and it was only the bit with the boards where they had to physically do anything. And that was a video that was sent to them, and then they went, right, so it utilizes ant and deck, that's good. They really like the concept of the routine. They love the fact that they didn't know who was behind the mask. So for that first audition, it was like minimal. Russ knew, and obviously my sort of group of people knew, and I had no idea how that was going to go. Again, I don't say this like, oh, you know, I had no idea. I thought I could walk out on stage and Simon Cowell could sit there and go, oh God, okay, hooded mask wearing guy, voiceover, what's all this? No idea how that was going to go. And we smashed it. I mean, like when we smashed it, and it was so.
Everybody was talking about that audition.
It was more surprising for me with that one than the audition the year before with Tessa and Isabella. You know, I thought if I do it well, I can hopefully get a good response. And I think because of the circumstances, they're not going to be rude to me, even if it's like a, you know, we kind of liked it. We've seen a lot of this sort of thing before. Hope your wife and daughter are well. Lovely. Thanks for coming. You know, whatever. Worst case scenario. But with this one, every element they could have been rude. They could have turned around and gone, I just didn't get it. I mean, you're touching him, and if it doesn't translate well and it just is, there's no clarity in it or whatever, I don't know. So so I was a lot more, I loved being X. I found being X much easier. And I mean, even now when I perform, 70% of the time I perform as X, 30% as Marc, but 70% people want X. I mean, I've been all over. I mean, I've done weddings in Indonesia and Jakarta and stuff like that as X. I mean, like, who has a wedding and who wants that guy walking around? But they do. So, you know, but once I got through to the semi-finals, I then got Russ actually, because obviously Russ knows it's me now, said to me, some of the production need to know, like they just need to sign it off that it's you. Like there's sort of legalities and things like that. Live television now, we can't, because Russ was really good at keeping it stumm and keeping it quiet from the production. It's like he would say to him, you don't need to know, don't worry about it. But then it got to a point like, Russ, we need to know. So then what happened was I got my agent signed off, got a document, a non-disclosure agreement that was like the people outside of the room. We drove all the way down to Wimbledon, turned up as X, went into this room, and it was one producer and his assistant. And I took the mask off, and the producer knew me from Marc the year before, and he just went, I won't say it, but like just went, you are kidding me. And then what was great from that point, he went, oh my God, no one can find out about this. No one. So then from that point, it was so much easier because they gave me blacked out dressing rooms. I was, you know, everything was like, no, don't go anywhere near X. No one goes near X. No one knocks on X's door. Leave X alone. So it became this whole thing. It became even more secretive. I had different sort of rehearsal times. All my rehearsals were done at home. They were kind of trying to make all the acts go down to a central rehearsal space so that they can oversee all the acts, because that's what you do. I mean, I did it as Marc as me in 2018. It was done at Elstree Studios, and it's easier to have all the acts in one space because they can just go around and go, right, juggling guys. Okay, brilliant, lovely. So that's what you're going to do in the semi-finals. Brilliant, love that. Here's a couple of notes. Right, magic act, like Matt Johnson doing the under the water escape. Okay, brilliant. Oh my God, you know, whatever. But it was like, no, X will rehearse his semi-final on his own, in his own sort of, you know, they offered to hire out, but I didn't need it. It was 2 chairs and an electrocution device. I'll do that in my living room. Don't worry about that. So yeah, so that was it. So that was the only people that knew. And even on the day of the final, when the mask was going to come off, if you imagine that video that plays in the final, I had to give that had to be given to the audio visual team. But the producer went in there and said, we are giving you a USB stick with X's final video on it. There are two versions. Version 1 does not have the end on it. Version 2 has the end on it. For this rehearsal, version 1. Please do not look at version 2. And they were all obligated not to look at version 2. So then when we did the rehearsal for the final, you imagine we're at the Hammersmith Apollo, and you've got some of the other acts are sort of hanging around in the seats. So I would do the whole performance, the interactive trick with, like move left, right, up, down, and all that sort of stuff. And then it got to a bit like, this video will explain everything, that last line that X says. And then the video starts to play and it gets to the middle and it just stops. And it was just like, end video, end video, end video, end video. So no one ever saw that end bit. So everyone then, when it came to the final, that's the first time that second video on the USB stick was played. So it was amazing. I loved it to bits. And when I after doing BGT, I then went over and we did America's Got Talent, the Champions. And that's where I got to meet Simon. I did the whole thing with Shin Lim, which was amazing. And Shin was fantastic. So professional.
I love that. That was so great.
Oh, Shin was fantastic. You know what? Because originally they said, because the weird thing that happened was they had signed up to do Britain's Got Talent, the Champions. And they didn't ask me to do it. They didn't ask X, but they'd asked Ben Hart and they'd asked a couple of other acts. I think Darcy Oak did it as well, but they never asked me. But I got a phone call from the producers and they said, would you consult on the show? And I was like, oh God, I thought you was going to phone up and say, could X be on the show? And they went, how, what would you mean? Like, you've sort of taken the mask off now, like X is that, how would that carry on? And I went, oh, you should have, like, well, okay. And I sort of turned, because I now the work compared to Marc Spelmann 2018, coming off stage as X 2019, polar opposite. I mean, we performed at the bottom of the Acropolis in Athens with LED screens and X, and it was incredible. We performed and Colin would always come with me, like, because now he was part of the act. He just understood X so well. And then we went to China twice before the pandemic broke out. Tessa says that I brought it back. I kind of, no, I never. but yeah, so I was in China twice, 2 different companies in China. Germany twice, crazy. A wedding, as I say, a wedding in Jakarta for a very wealthy couple. It was nuts, totally the opposite. So I was everywhere, and I couldn't even do the consultation for Britain's Got Talent Champions because I was just too busy. And at the 11th hour, I got a phone call from BGT, and they said, please, can we have X on Britain's Got Talent Champions? But I was already booked to do this wedding in Jakarta, so I said, I can't do it. As much as I'd love to, I would have loved to have done it, and I would have probably done something very like Shin Lim, but I would have done it on Britain's Got Talent Champions. But then Tessa was going through my Instagram as X on Instagram, and she said, you do know America's Got Talent has been in contact with you, the Champions? And then Tessa found that, and I was like, oh right, okay. Got in contact with them and said, hi, you've tried to reach out. And the performance of America's Got Talent, the Champions, originally they said, we want that to be an actor or a singer. There was one point it was even going to be a woman under the mask. And I was a bit dubious about it. I thought, I don't know, I'm not sure, because there was an element of magic, with the easel, with the changing face. So I built that over here. And even though it was so simple to do, a magician does it, and they'll do it. Whereas teaching a person how to vanish a coin with a French drop, and I know that we can do that pretty easily. But getting someone who's a non-magician to do it is a different thing. So anyway, so they said, how do you feel about Shin Lim? And I was like, would Shin do it? And they got in contact with Shin and said, would you like to be X? And he was like, yes, I would. It was kind of like,
I think every magician in the world would like a chance.
He was brilliant. And something that was really nice, what Shin said, just before we did the performance, he said, I'm more nervous doing this. And you got to remember, Shin had won like AGT and won AGT. Like he's the poster boy of America's Got Talent. You know, he's won it all. And he said, I was more nervous doing that performance than any of my own. And I went to him, why? And he said, because I'm responsible for my act. I'm now part of this responsibility is for your act. And he goes, and that's a game changer for me. I've got to be in the right place for the switch and the whole, you know, all the technique that happened. But then the reason why I mentioned the AGT thing is at the end of doing AGT, as I say, I came out in the semi-finals. My semi-final didn't go quite again. I'm jinxed with this semi-final thing. Technical difficulties in the world of mentalism didn't quite help me out on the semi-final of AGT Champions. And I came out in the semi-finals. And as I mentioned earlier, I sat down with Simon. Like my producer came over and said to me, "Oh, Marc, Simon wants to see you." And I was like, "Simon?" Thinking, "Simon?" And they went, "Yeah, Simon. I was like, "Simon? All right, okay." So I went down, because even though you're on BGT, like when you're meeting Simon and the judges, it's very fleeting. It's very much, "Oh, thanks." You know, it's kind of very fleeting. Anyway, so then I went down to Simon's dressing room expecting there to be a whole group of people, like all of us, and him giving us a bit of a thanks for coming over, guys. You've all been great. And it was just me and him. And he went, Marc, he goes, "Oh, God, I was so frustrated with that semi-final." And then he said, what happened? What was the technical difficulties? And I explained a couple of bits. And he said, "I know you. If you'd have got through to the final, there was something." And I have to say, and I'm not saying this as a teaser, but my final performance on America's Got Talent, the Champions, might have actually, it would have been hard to beat the mask coming off, but it would have been really close. It was a big one.
Do you think you'll ever get a chance to do that somewhere else at some point?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, so, and then I had this conversation with Simon for about half an hour. And I've always wondered, like, Simon is the big boss, right? It's his show, BGT, right? And I always wondered, did he know that it was me? Because even that non-disclosure agreement that I signed with the producer, you know, Simon's the boss. If he says something, goes like, "Who is X?" They could have turned around and said, "Oh, you remember Marc from last year? It's him," you know. So I'm sitting down with Simon. We're having a good old chat about all the different experiences that BGT's given me and everything else, and just talking about it because he's had his son Eric. So we were talking about being fathers and life changing and all that kind of stuff. Really lovely. And then he said, he goes, "Got any questions for me?" And I went, "Yes, I have." And I said, "You've got to be honest, because it's all done now. It doesn't matter, but you've got to be honest." And he went, "Go on." And I went, "Did you know that it was me?" And he said, "I turned to one of the producers after your semi-final, because I was behind him with this hope on a card, and that really freaked him out, because I think his security and stuff like that were like, how did that happen? How could we not see a masked hooded guy in a shop window behind Simon?" And obviously there are techniques and things, you know, whatever. But and he said, after that, you smashed it. You won your semi-final. And I said to one of the producers, the producer that knew at this point, "This X character, is it anything that I need to know?" And then the producer turned around and said to Simon, "I can tell you, or you can just let it blow your head off." And then Simon went, "Let it blow my head off. Don't tell me." So he said, on that moment when you took the mask off, I did not know it was you. Genuinely had no idea it was you. So yeah, so that's
what a journey. What a journey. And
an experience.
And now, I mean, obviously we're going to wrap this interview up in a second, but now you're traveling all over the world. You've got so many opportunities. You've just said you probably perform more as X than Marc Spelmann. Are you cool with that? Because
yeah, I am. I tell you why, because I am. I love performing as me, and for the smaller things, like say for instance, I did something over in Spain, not last year. Yeah, no, about a year and a half ago, I was over in Spain. It was for a pharmaceutical company, and they manufacture medicine for people that are fighting cancer, and especially children. So it was a really amazing gig to do. And that one I did as me. And I loved it because I got to speak about, like I had some really lovely lines in it. Not lines, but things. I gave this sort of keynote speech at the end. I gave a keynote speech and then did a 20-minute performance. But I was mainly there to give a speech, like a keynote. And I've done a couple of keynotes in my time, but a lot of the time it's about magic, and about like, the impossible and how do you create the impossible and improbable and all that kind of stuff. But this one was different, and they and one of I remember saying to Tess, I've got to do this keynote, but it's about like life and cancer and all of the things that come with it. And then Tessa said to me, that's not something you can write, you should just speak from your heart. And I remember just rehearsing it a few times, but just literally putting on an audio recorder and just do it on my own, just talking, and then just making a few notes about things that I felt were really poignant moments. So when I went over to Spain to do this performance, I literally had a couple of cue cards, but the rest of it was just free flowing, because I think you speak from experience, and lines would ruin it in that way. But so I really enjoy doing that when it's that sort of personal. But I love X because the performances are big. I mean, like when we go, the rider for X is pretty big. It's like it has to be LED screens. We have like these. I think they're sort of 14. It's 10-meter wide by 4-meter high minimum LED screens for any X performance. So when we were at the bottom of the Acropolis and stuff, it just looked like Jean. I don't know if you remember Jean-Michel Jarre. It was like lasers, and it was crazy. And for a moment, I get to be a superhero that doesn't really have any powers, I guess. But it feels amazing to you, just because I genuinely, when I perform as X, I don't talk. Once that mask goes on, I don't talk, and I don't. It's weird. It's almost like you just take on that persona. So I love it for that reason. So yeah, I am cool with it. It's fun. It's really good fun, and it's very different to me. Like even now, my performances as me as Marc, I'm very sort of like it's about life. It's about and I try and sort of still have that blend with the magic or mind reading that I'm doing. I'm not the hard sort of core mentalist anymore in any way, even as myself, So, but I do like performing as X. It's creatively, theatrically, there's a change. When I walk into a theatre, we did one at the NEC recently, and they had the whole. It was well before the pandemic. The DPD, the people that are delivering all the packages to everyone. They had this massive annual awards thing in at the NEC, and that one was literally. I walked out and the room went silent as this music played and X just walked along. It was like these lights that lit up as I made my way through the audience onto the stage. And there's just something so cool about doing that. I get to live, it's like a boyhood, like childhood dream of being Darth Vader for a minute. Do you know what I mean?
That is so cool. Well, you've given some amazing advice during this interview. I'm going to ask you for one more piece of advice.
Go for it.
If somebody's watching this and they're considering going on BGT, what should they do? Should they do it? And what one piece of advice would you give them if they are going to do it? As somebody who has more than once.
Yes, I think they should do it, but there are there's certain things to consider and to take into consideration, as with anything. Reason why they should really seriously consider doing it is because it is a good platform, like even like this year, and I feel for the people that were on it this year, like, you had Damien O'Brien, James Piper, and Jasper, you had some amazing magicians on there this year. And I feel for them in a way because there was no entertainment industry to come out to, you know what I mean? They literally finished the show, and then you're walking out to empty conference centres and places where they would have effectively been getting work. So I felt it was a bit of a tough time for the guys that were on it this year, the BGT just gone. But I think that whatever you're going to do, make sure you've got it down. You've absolutely got it down. You've done it so much that that there's no chance of it going wrong. I mean, there's always a chance that something could go wrong, of course there is, but you've done everything in your power to 99% fail safe. your whatever it is you're doing, and we're based it on magic because of magic, but also look at what's been done, because it is a television show and they do like to mix it up. They do like to chop and change it. I think Simon is not a massive fan of the card magic. And I think once you've had Shin Lim on America's Got Talent, and the champions in America, and he's won it, you kind of think, well, okay, what are you going to do card wise? Shin's kind of smashed it with the card magic. So just try to be as original as you can be, but equally, same advice as to getting gigs at the very, very beginning of our chat, and that is just be nice. Just be as nice and as down to earth as you can possibly be. But also as well, don't feel I think one of the things that people worry about is that having any kind of a story, you've got to remember that the Joe public, they want to invest in you. And as good as your act might, I mean, obviously X didn't have a backstory, but X was so weird that people kind of got involved with it because it was just so weird. But don't shy away from having elements of yourself as some form of a storyline. You don't have to go like, I mean, obviously my one was massively personal and very deep and emotive, but you don't have to go that route. Jamie Raven, when he did his one, he was quite humble and just talking about being a gigging magician and, loving his wife and, wanting to have a go on BGT. And that was enough to be, and him being a nice guy came across really well. And then obviously Richard Jones had his thing of his sort of hook, if you like, was being in the army, which worked beautifully for him. And I think he had I really enjoyed his auditions, his pieces on the show. So yeah, definitely go for it, but just because life is about experiences, and I think to myself, all we've got at the end of all of this really is just experiences, and it's always better to, I think, I've had some horrendous gigs, and I've got horror stories that I'm so glad you never asked me about because we're running out of time and we can't talk about them, right? But I've had some gigs where you just go, that, oh, really? Like horrible, oh, God. But, and I've taken some risks and I've done some things, and I think that you learn from the things that don't go well and you can enjoy the things that did, and I think that so I would say that BGT is an incredible experience, and it's something that, and that's what life is. It's a series of experiences. We collect experiences and we can reflect on them and tell stories about them. So for that reason, 100% do it. Just make whatever you're going to do be as strong as it can possibly be. Try to be original if you can, or give it a unique twist if possible, if you're going to go on the show, and just and be so, like, like when I did my performance in 2018, it was like to when I mean, we haven't really touched on this subject, but about rehearsing, right? For me to rehearse for that show, I remember that's where Russ was brilliant. Like, Russ would say to me, right, from the middle of the Palladium stage down to the judges is, I think we worked it out, it was like 30 steps or something like that, sort of steps. And Russ kind of paced it out with me and said, so when you start your talking, start it here, because then by the time you get to the judge's desk, you'll be on point. And things like that, you just kind of go, God, yeah, geez, got to think of all these things.
Russ is brilliant with that sort of thing.
Yeah, honestly, really, really good. If there's, I mean, like, I think Russ would tell you this, and I think he might have done because you've done an interview with Russ, and I think, like, Russ will tell you, that, like, the idea for my acts, for X and for me and all that, they were set. They were my ideas. But what Russ really helped me do was just refine it, just tight, especially me. I mean, X, it was all pre-recorded anyway, but with me, it was about just trimming the fat off and just making sure that like I said, don't say it twice, refine it. You can say that if you can say it with 7 words, say it with 7 words. Don't say it with 10, because
Russ has this ability of taking a performance and adding a piece of music that you've never heard before
Yeah.
and just making it a million times better.
Oh, 100%. And just
Music.
that level of, because Russ is he's good at directing. He's really good at directing and stuff like that, and pacing and stuff like that. So when I rehearsed it, I had my dining room table and a wallpaper paste table, because like Russ said to me, the desk that the judges set is a lot longer than you think it is. So even moving from one judge to the other, you got to go, oh, right. So that is a good sort of couple of steps over to get to a mat, and you're sort of side shimmying along to get there because the platform's not massive. So all these weird things. So, you literally need to rehearse as you're doing. And I had, as I say, dining table, wallpaper paste table, roughly the right length. And I had Isabella's cuddly toys on chairs, and I spoke to them like they were real. Like you have to do it that way. Don't kind of run through a rehearsal. Do it. I audio recorded my dialogue to see if I ever said slightly better lines or a slightly quicker pace sounded better, and I recorded it as well, just like how I'm holding myself walking down to, you really got to fine tune it to that level. So just, it's arguably the most important gig. It could be one of the most important performances that you ever do. It's certainly going to be one of the most watched performances that you will ever do if you go on Britain's Got Talent. That audition is, like, I think my one is on the BGT website, YouTube channel, is 28 million views, but that's just on YouTube. If you go onto Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that, you got 55 million and this, that, and it. So it's like there's no other performance in my life that is ever going to equal that. I mean, ironically, when I performed as X and did the Ant and Deck routine on Facebook, I think it was less than 2 weeks. It was 105 million views on Facebook. It just went nuts as X with the first sort of PK touch routine. But it's going to be your most watched performance, so make sure you give it everything you've got. You do yourself justice, So that would be my bit of advice. But 100% do it. Consider everything. Give everything a go. Why not?
That's one thing that I've got from listening to you through this whole interview. The message that you've put across over and over again is just go for it. Don't be the guy that's sitting down at home on your own. If you want to get on the agency's books, make it happen. If you want to go out and get work, make it happen. If you want to go on BGT, make it happen.
And you know what? I'll tell you why I'm so like. I mean, I'm 49 years old, so I'm 50. I'm the big 50 in September, right? So for me, I've been that guy. I've been that guy whose ego, and so maybe it's ego, and maybe it's a touch of insecurity, would stop me from going for certain things. Well, I'm not going to ask them if they would want to do a TV show. Why? Well, because they might say no, but they might say yes. Who cares? If they say no, whatever, just move on. But I was that guy for a long time that would avoid those situations. And now, life, if only I could talk to my 20-year-old self, I might be in a different place. I mean, I'm quite happy where I am, but, I might be in an even better place, but so yeah, I've been that guy. So don't be that guy. Don't be that girl. Just go for it. The worst you can hear is no. And just like we said at the very top end, that no is one less no, and that's you getting closer to that yes. So just go for it. Really go for it.
That's brilliant advice. Now I'm going to finish off this whole interview, Marc, by asking you a question that I ask everyone, and it is especially pertinent to you, which is what's next? And what I mean by that, and I know considering everything you've done, you're still a very humble guy. But let us be clear here. You have had the career that most people would dream of. Even before BGT happened, you've created magic. You've traveled around the world performing magic. You've performed at a very high level. Most magicians couldn't even dream of doing that. And then you do BGT and AGT, and your career skyrocketed. I mean, you are an inspiration, and so many magicians wish they could even come close to what you've achieved, but you're still a young guy. You're only 49.
Bless you.
Hey, I'm 44. I'm calling anyone in their 40s young, okay?
Yeah.
You're a young guy. You're a young guy. I
what's
know that you're probably not slowing down. So what's next?
no,
Is
do
there
you know
anything
what?
left on your magical bucket list?
Yeah, do you know what? I would love, I would really, really love. I don't think I'd ever want to be as famous as like Dynamo or a David Blaine or a Darren Brown. I don't think I'd want to be that famous because I think you lose something in being that famous. I can still go out and, unless you watch Britain's Got Talent, you probably ain't got a clue who I am, And even some of the people that have watched Britain's Got Talent is 2 years down the line. That's another thing as well. If it goes horribly wrong on Britain's Got Talent, don't let that define the rest of your days, because people can't remember who won it like 4 or 5 years ago. Most people, I mean, we can, because we invest in it a bit more. We watch it, I remember the years that the magicians have done well and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a BGT guy, so I watch it. But most people, if you said to them, who won Britain's Got Talent in 2015, most people go, I don't know, don't remember. It's like the Masked Magician. I mean, I can't stand that whole thing that happened with the Masked Magician in the early early 90s, wasn't it? But most people can't remember how those tricks worked. So you could effectively, any of that stuff that was exposed back then, you could still do it. And not that that makes it right, but you know what I mean? Um, so no, for me now, going forward, I would love to do a TV special, just 1 hour, just 1 hour. If they said, oh, here's a series, but the only reason is not for ego, because I've done all right. I haven't done bad, and I've enjoyed it, and I love what I've done with X, and I think X is my, in the world of magic, X and doing what I did on Britain's Got Talent, as more so as X than me. Um, I think that will be that's my signature for magic. When I shuffle off this earth, that will be the thing that might be looked up, or they'll go, what's this weird mask wearing woman voice thing on this old bit of MP4, kind of thing in years to come. And that will be what I leave with magic. And if that's it, then that's fine by me. But I would love to do a special, or have a 1 hour special, purely because of the ideas that I've got. I've got some brilliant, brilliant ideas that don't work on a Britain's Got Talent show, utilizing X and some of the philosophies of X and how I sort of view the world now, would work brilliantly in a 1 hour special, and for that reason, I'd love it, because that's the only canvas I could paint it on.
Mm.
So that would be the one thing I'd love to do. But aside from that, I've got about 6 or 7 really good corporate gigs that have just been paused since 12 months ago, that are still paused. My agent is still like, no, they're still ready to go. We're just waiting for a conference room being allowed to fill up, and we're there. So I've got the corporate gigs, enjoying Isabella growing up, and all that kind of stuff, and enjoying my time with her and stuff, that's the most important thing to me. But career wise, magically, yeah, I just carrying on my performances as X, exploring X. Even if I didn't do any more television, it's just exploring X in a theatrical sense, in theatre potentially, and corporate wise, just doing really strong, and being for the rest of my career now, I performed only as X at corporate events around the world. Well, tough life, eh? You know what I mean? Like flying about doing that. So I'm good. I've really enjoyed it, and it's given me opportunities to do things like this, sitting down with magical mates such as yourself and having a good old chinwag. And God only knows it's lovely to sit down and talk magic. And I've enjoyed your videos as well, because it's just, we're all missing the magic meets, and you've kind of given us a bit of a thing, to sort of catch up on and stuff. So it's all been good. It's all been good.
That means a lot, Mark. Thank you. And it has been amazing you having you on the channel. Yeah, I mean, if people want to check out can I put your social media down there?
100%. So with me, there's a couple of different ones. So you've got they're all the same on Facebook and Twitter. So but I've got 2 lots, which is a bit of a burden, if I'm honest, because you've got to think of content for both, and X is a real challenge sometimes. Me, it's easy. I can just put up pictures of Isabella and go homeschooling daddy today, but X doesn't really do that kind of thing. So if people want to find me, it's at I am Spelmann. So that's at I am, and then Spelmann is we put it up a graphic, but it's
Yeah, I'll pick it up, man.
it's one L, two N's in Spelmann, and the other one. Magician X is I am Magician X, at I am Magician X, and that's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And yeah, and I'm on YouTube. My YouTube channel is I've really got to take a leaf out of your book, Craig. I've really got to up my game with YouTube because your content is boom, 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 boom. It's fantastic, and it's like, you know, I'll do one video every 6 months, and it takes me ages to get it out. So I'm really trying to utilize. I mean,
Well, I heard you say that you had videos that you were going to put up of stuff that happened over BGT.
yeah. So I've got
What is
diary
the
stuff. You know, I've got video diaries just of like literally the moment after the audition as X back in the apartment with a rather large bottle of whiskey and me and Colin getting absolutely hammered because we smashed it. It was this pipe dream that just worked, like just, you know. So yeah, I've got loads of some footage won't ever come out because there's some embarrassing footage of me quite drunk in Manchester. But there's some fun stuff like us driving up in the car. And I've got a baseball hat on and sunglasses on, even on the motorway as we're approaching Manchester, just in case someone. And I have been recognised on the motorway about 6 months ago with Tessa in the car on the motorway. The car pulls up. We're driving on the M25, driving along, and this guy turns around and does the X symbol. Goes, "It's X. It's X." So,
That is brilliant.
So,
What's the YouTube handle? And I'll put it
so
down there.
YouTube, I believe it's just Marc Spelmann Magician X on YouTube. Yeah, but I'll send it to you so you can do a
Yeah, and I'll put it all in there. And one last question, because I know I'm going to get this in the comments down below. So I'm gonna cause myself no pain by asking it.
Go for it.
Will you at some point revisit creativity and bring out any other projects through Alakazam or whatever else? Because I know, knowing you, I know you've still been creating.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You can't help yourself. You can't help yourself.
Yeah, so, no. I will do. I absolutely will do. For me, it's there's two factors. It's one is time, just getting the time to do it. And two is that now I kind of I really only if I think something really is worthwhile releasing, and I don't mean financially, if I because I can go and do a gig and make money, you know. So it's more about if I feel that it really is something that other people are going to be able to benefit from using, then I'll do it. And so there's a few things that that definitely are going to come out. I mean, I've got stuff that's not for the magic community as such, like Magician X has got a deck of cards that's coming out, and it's got a little sort of online tutorial where you kind of can watch Marc Spelmann performing card magic on X, and then you can learn how to do these tricks. But it's way for Joe Public. It's the very early beginner magic trick stuff and all that, and that's only because I get bombarded with, will X be having a magic set? Will X be doing this? My son loves X, and I just went, right, let's just do a deck of cards and some nice tutorials that kids can kind of learn from and stuff. So I've done that. That's all ready to go very, very soon. But
well, you know what I'd like to see, Marc? I would like to see when the Blackpool Magic Convention comes back in 2022, I'd like to see X headlining the gala show. That would be.
I think you got Chris Angel ahead of me on that one because he was supposed
Who's Chris Angel? We don't need him.
Well, listen, I would you know what, I did the Blackpool Magic Convention as me, and it was all right. I didn't feel it that much. I would love to do it as X.
I think magicians would lose their mind if X walked out on stage.
Yeah, I think I would like to do it because the
so beloved in the magic community. Really was.
Yeah, well, the facilities at the Blackpool Magic Convention, I mean, that the stage facilities are brilliant. I mean, fantastic, and obviously Russ is behind a lot of that with the Blackpool Magic Club as well. So, I mean, yeah, the facilities are great. I mean, anyone that can house Hans Clock, the amount of stuff he had at the Blackpool Magic Convention backstage. I mean, his flight cases it was astronomical. But yeah, so yeah, I'd love to do it as X. I'd prefer to do it as X, actually. I think that'd be really good. I think it's a good space. But yeah, we shall see. We shall see.
Watch this space. A lot more to come from both X and Marc Spelmann, which is amazing.
Thank you, Craig.
Marc, thank you once again for coming on the channel and taking time to chat to everybody. Guys, please do me a favor and leave a comment down below. I'm sure Marc will see it. Go subscribe to all of his socials. You'll see those in the descriptions down below. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be back tomorrow with another video. But one more time, Marc, thank you so much for spending time here.
More than welcome. Absolute pleasure, mate. Lovely talking to you.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone. Bye.